The test slipped from Mary's fingers and hit the bathroom tile. 2 pink lines. Twins. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the plastic stick that had just rewritten her future. 25 years old, a struggling artist, and now pregnant after one night with a man whose world existed in a different orbit from hers. Mary pressed her back against the cool bathroom door and slid to the floor, her hands trembling as reality crashed over her. One night. One choice. 2 lives now growing inside her. Flash forward, Prentice Women's Hospital, Chicago. Harsh fluorescent lighting illuminated the delivery room as David Hamilton knelt on the cold hospital floor. Tears streamed freely down his face. This powerful CEO, this man who commanded boardrooms and built skyscrapers, completely undone by 7 pounds of new life. "Hi, little moon," he whispered, kissing his daughter's tiny hand. When his son arrived minutes later, David pressed his forehead gently against the newborn's dark hair. His voice broke as he made a promise. "I love you both. I am here. I will earn you. And I will earn her." The nurses exchanged glances, moved by this raw display of emotion from a man whose face regularly appeared in business magazines. If your heart has ever told you to stay when fear told you to run, this story will speak to you. The journey these 2 people traveled from strangers to family wasn't easy. It required courage, forgiveness, and growth. Before we continue, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. If you value real stories about human connection and second chances, your engagement helps these messages reach others who might need them today. Now, let's go back to where it all began. 3 months before that life-changing pregnancy test, Mary worked 2 jobs and painted at night. Her studio apartment sat above a noisy deli in River North. The rent was cheap. The walls were thin, but her dreams were not. Mary Adams hadn't planned on becoming a struggling artist when she moved to Chicago 3 years ago. Armed with an art degree and determination, she'd arrived in the city believing talent would open doors. Reality proved harsher. The competitive art scene had little room for newcomers without connections or pedigree. Her days followed a relentless rhythm, mornings at lakefront coffee, shops serving lattes to hurried professionals, afternoons teaching, art to children at the River North Community Center, and nights painting in her tiny studio apartment above Gino's Deli. The constant hum of refrigerators and early morning deliveries had become the soundtrack to her creative process. At 25, Mary lived on instant noodles and hope. Her apartment doubled as her studio, easels crowded against a second-hand futon, canvases stacked, long walls, and a makeshift kitchen table that transformed into her workspace each evening. The bathroom sink often ran blue or yellow from washing brushes late at night. Despite these challenges, Mary's watercolors captured something special, the fleeting moments. Between darkness and dawn when Lake Michigan reflected the first hint of light, gallery owners praised her unique perspective, but rarely offered wall space. Critics called her work promising, but couldn't place her in any established movement. Her friend, Kiana, a graphic designer who'd found stable work in advertising, repeatedly urged Mary to consider more commercial opportunities. "Your talent deserves more than appreciation," she'd say. "It deserves compensation." When Miller Street Gallery invited Mary to contribute 3 pieces to their annual charity auction, she viewed it as her first real chance at visibility. The gallery specialized in emerging artists, and their patron list included influential collectors and critics. One good impression could change everything. The Peninsula Hotel stood as a monument to luxury in the heart of Chicago, its elegant facade glowing against the November night. Mary paused before entering, clutching her portfolio and trying to calm her racing heart. Inside awaited the city's elite, wealthy patrons, established artists, and influential critics who could transform her career with a single nod of approval. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, smoothing the simple black dress Kiana had insisted she borrow for the occasion. The garment fit perfectly, but couldn't disguise her feeling of inadequacy. The hotel lobby gleamed with marble and crystal, each surface reflecting wealth accumulated over generations. Doormen in crisp uniforms guided guests toward the grand ballroom where the charity gala unfolded in full splendor. Women draped in designer gowns that cost more than Mary's annual rent glided across the floor. Men in perfectly tailored suits exchanged business cards and knowing smiles. Mary approached the registration table, acutely aware of her sensible heels and lack of jewelry. The coordinator checked her name against the list of contributing artists. "Your pieces are displayed in the East Gallery," she explained, handing Mary a name badge. "The auction begins at 9. Mary nodded, trying to project confidence as she navigated through clusters of people. engaged in animated conversations about summer homes and investment portfolios. Champagne flowed freely, carried on silver trays by attentive staff. Classical music from a string quartet floated through air scented with expensive perfume. Near the bar, a group of established artists from prominent galleries discussed upcoming exhibitions. Their easy laughter and insider references reinforced Mary's outsider status. She sipped water, unable to afford even a momentary loss of composure from alcohol. "First time?" asked an older woman with kind eyes and an elaborate emerald necklace. "Is it that obvious?" Mary replied with a self-conscious laugh. "Only to those who remember their own first time," the woman said. "Your work must be special if you're here. Go stand by it. The right people will find you." Mary stationed herself beside her watercolor triptych, 3 connected scenes capturing Lake Michigan at dawn, the first hints of light breaking through darkness, colors emerging from shadows, hope asserting itself against night. Unlike the bold abstract pieces dominating the room, her work invited viewers to lean closer, to discover subtle details and quiet moments. Several attendees paused briefly before moving on to more provocative installations. A few nodded appreciatively, but offered no comments. Mary maintained her professional smile despite growing disappointment. Perhaps her work was too subtle for this crowd, too understated in a room that valued bold statements. "These are yours." The deep voice came from behind her. Mary turned to find herself looking up at a tall man in his mid-30s, wearing a midnight blue suit that complemented his confident posture. His dark hair was precisely cut, his jawline sharp, but it was his eyes that caught her attention. An intense green that studied her work with genuine interest rather than cursory politeness. "Yes," she answered, extending her hand. "I'm Mary Adams." "David Hamilton," he replied, his grip warm and firm. Recognition flickered through Mary's mind. David Hamilton, CEO of Hamilton Development Group, whose buildings were transforming Chicago's skyline. His company's latest project, a sustainable mixed-use tower on the riverfront, had been featured in architectural magazines worldwide. His name regularly appeared on lists of the city's most eligible bachelors and most influential business leaders. He turned back to her paintings, his attention complete, as though the crowded room had disappeared. Mary found herself holding her breath, surprised by how much his opinion suddenly mattered. "Your light feels honest," David said, after several moments of silence. His statement wasn't delivered as flattery or casual observation, but as a thoughtful conclusion reached after careful consideration. Mary blinked in surprise. Most viewers commented on technique or color choices, the standard vocabulary of polite art appreciation. David had somehow identified the core intention behind her work, the pursuit of authentic moments when light revealed truth. "That's exactly what I'm trying to capture," she admitted. "Everyone paints the dramatic sunrise or sunset, but I'm interested in the uncertain moment just before, when possibility exists but isn't yet guaranteed." David nodded, moving closer to examine the middle panel, where pale blue began asserting itself against retreating darkness. "This particular transition," he said, pointing to where water met sky, "has a vulnerability to it, like watching someone make a difficult decision." His observation was so precisely aligned with her intent that Mary felt momentarily exposed, as though he'd read something personal in her brushstrokes. Most people saw pretty lake scenes. He saw emotional landscapes. "May I ask why water?" He gestured toward all 3 paintings. "Specifically this stretch of Lake Michigan?" "It's constant yet always changing," Mary explained. "I can visit the same spot every morning and never see the same light twice. There's something honest about that. The permanence of the lake itself against the impermanence of each moment on its surface." David's focus remained entirely on her, undistracted by the prominent gallery owner who passed by or the minor celebrity who laughed too loudly nearby. In a room designed for networking and social climbing, his undivided attention felt almost radical. "Tell me about your process," David said, stepping back to take in all 3 panels as a connected narrative. "These feel like they were created in sequence rather than as separate works." Mary nodded, impressed by his perception. "They were painted over 3 consecutive mornings, from the same location on the lakefront. I arrive while it's still dark and set up my materials by flashlight. That requires dedication," he observed, "especially during Chicago winters. I've developed a system," Mary explained, warming to the subject. "The cold actually helps with watercolor techniques. It changes how the pigment settles and how quickly the paper absorbs moisture. I use a heavier paper weight in winter, usually 300 GSM cold press." David listened attentively as Mary described her approach to capturing fleeting light conditions. She explained how she prepared her palette beforehand, mixing specific color combinations that would allow quick application when the moment arrived. The entire sequence, the transition from night to day, happens in about 20 minutes, she continued. I work quickly, making notation sketches first, then applying the most critical color values before the light changes completely. So what we're seeing is both observation and memory, David concluded. The beginning captured directly, the completion finished from your mental impression of the moment. Mary smiled, genuinely delighted by his understanding. Exactly. That's why I call the series First Light, Last Dark. It's that liminal space where both conditions exist simultaneously. The conversation shifted to technical aspects, her preference for certain pigments, her methods for achieving transparency and depth, her choice to work on location rather than from photographs. Unlike other patrons who feigned interest while waiting for an opportunity to speak about themselves, David asked thoughtful questions that built upon her previous answers. When the auction announcer called for guests to take their seats, David checked his watch with apparent surprise. Would you join me? He asked, gesturing toward the dining area. Mary hesitated only briefly before nodding. As they walked together, she noticed the subtle glances from other attendees, curiosity, assessment, perhaps even envy. David Hamilton rarely attended these functions, and when he did, he certainly didn't spend an hour discussing watercolor techniques with unknown artists. The evening had just become much more interesting than Mary had anticipated. The auction proceeded with enthusiasm, wealthy patrons raising paddles for various pieces. When Mary's watercolor triptych came up, she held her breath, hoping for at least a few bids that would validate her presence at such a prestigious event. 5,000, called a voice from the back. 7,000, countered another. Mary's heart raced as the bidding continued, far exceeding her expectations. When it reached $12,000, she couldn't believe her ears. 20,000, said David Hamilton calmly from beside her. A hush fell over the room. The auctioneer paused, clearly surprised, before continuing. 20,000 going once, twice, sold to Mr. Hamilton. Mary turned to him, eyes wide with shock. You didn't need to do that, she whispered as applause filled the room. I wanted to, he replied simply. Your work matters. As the auction concluded and guests dispersed into smaller groups for cocktails and conversation, David leaned closer. Would you like some air? The terrace has an excellent view of the city. Mary nodded, still processing the fact that her paintings had just sold for more money than she typically earned in a year. They made their way through glass doors to the peninsula's elegant terrace where the November night air carried just enough chill to keep most guests inside. Chicago spread before them like a galaxy of lights, buildings reaching toward the sky, traffic moving along Michigan Avenue, the distant shimmer of Lake Michigan reflecting the city's glow. The terrace offered them privacy, a quiet bubble amidst the evening's social whirl. Thank you, Mary said, genuinely moved. Not just for buying my work, but for seeing what I was trying to express. That doesn't happen often. People miss a lot when they're not really looking, David replied, his gaze taking in the cityscape. I've learned to pay attention to quiet things that reveal deeper truths. Their conversation flowed with surprising ease. David spoke about his architectural vision for Chicago, buildings that honored the city's heritage while embracing sustainability. Mary shared her journey from small-town Wisconsin to the competitive Chicago art scene, the sacrifices and uncertainties. What made you leave everything familiar behind? He asked, genuinely curious. I needed to discover if my vision could stand on its own, she answered honestly. If I stayed, I'd never know if people valued my work or just supported me because they knew my family. David nodded with understanding. Independence forces clarity. Exactly, Mary agreed, surprised at how easily he grasped concepts she'd struggled to articulate to others. As the evening progressed, they discovered unexpected commonalities. Both had lost parents young. Both valued solitude for creative thinking. Both rose before dawn by choice rather than necessity. Their backgrounds couldn't have been more different. His world of boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions, hers of community, art classes, and budget stretching. Yet their conversation revealed aligned values and complementary perspectives. You see the world differently than anyone I've met in a long time, David admitted. Most people in my circles view everything as assets to acquire or leverage. And you don't? Mary asked, genuinely curious. I used to, he replied, his expression thoughtful. Success came early and I followed the expected path. But lately I've been questioning what we're building and why. The city lights reflected in his eyes as he spoke about wanting his work to create genuine value beyond profit margins. Mary found herself drawn not just to his presence, but to his complexity, a man who wielded enormous power yet questioned its purpose, who could have surrounded himself with sycophants but sought authentic connection instead. The night air grew cooler as they stood side by side at the terrace railing, their shoulders nearly touching. A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind that usually takes months or years to develop. The sounds of the gala inside faded to background noise. "I should probably thank you properly for purchasing my work," Mary said, breaking the silence. "But I'm not entirely sure how to thank someone for spending $20,000 on paintings." David turned to face her, his expression earnest. "You already have, by creating something authentic in a world filled with calculated performances. Your art speaks truth when most people are just reciting lines." His gaze held hers with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. The space between them seemed charged with potential energy, a current neither had anticipated when the evening began. "I've never met anyone like you," he said softly. "I saw you the moment you walked in tonight, not just your physical presence, but something in how you carried yourself. Apart from all this," he gestured toward the gala inside. Mary felt simultaneously exposed and recognized, as though he'd glimpsed something essential about her that others missed. "Tell me I'm not alone in this," David said, his voice dropping to a register. That sent warmth spreading through her body despite the cool night air. Mary studied his face, the genuine question in his eyes, the vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. In that moment, she made a decision to be equally honest. "You're not alone," she answered softly. She rose on her toes as he leaned down, their lips meeting halfway. The first kiss was gentle, questioning, a conversation rather than a declaration. They separated briefly, eyes meeting in silent confirmation before coming together again. The second kiss deepened, his hand moving to the small of her back, hers finding the solid warmth of his shoulder. Time seemed to suspend as the distant sounds of traffic and music faded completely. All that existed was this connection, unexpected and profound. When they finally separated, Mary felt slightly dizzy, anchored only by his steady presence. David's composed demeanor had shifted, his breathing uneven, his usual self-assurance replaced by something more vulnerable. "I didn't come here tonight expecting this," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face with gentle fingers. "Neither did I," Mary admitted. "But I'm glad it happened." Their third kiss carried certainty, the hesitation of newness giving way to growing familiarity. His arms encircled her completely, protective without being possessive. Her hands found the nape of his neck, fingers threading through his hair. When they separated, the night had grown later, the terrace emptier. The gala continued inside, but it seemed to belong to another world entirely. "Would you like to leave?" David asked, his voice low and intimate. "We could go somewhere quieter." The implication hung in the air between them, not presumptuous, but clear. Mary considered her options with surprising clarity. She barely knew this man, yet felt a connection unlike anything she'd experienced before. The rational voice in her head listed reasons to decline. The intuitive voice recognized something rare worth exploring. "Yes," she decided. "I'd like that." David made their departure discreet, stopping briefly to thank the gallery owner and make arrangements for delivery of Mary's paintings. Within minutes they were stepping into the back of a sleek black car that waited at the hotel entrance. "Lakeshore Drive," David instructed the driver, who nodded without comment. As the car glided through Chicago's evening traffic, Mary watched the city transform through tinted windows. The downtown lights gave way to the elegant residential buildings that lined the lakefront. David maintained a respectful distance beside her, their hands touching lightly between them on the leather seat. "I live alone," he said, answering her unasked question. "My work doesn't leave much room for relationships." "Mine either," Mary admitted, "though for different reasons." "What are your reasons?" he asked. "Time, mainly. Between jobs and painting, my schedule doesn't exactly welcome dating, and finding someone who understands the compulsion to create." She trailed off with a small shrug. "The need to make something meaningful." David finished her thought. "I understand that completely." The car pulled up to one of Chicago's most prestigious buildings, a modern glass tower that rose gracefully against the night sky. The doorman greeted David by name, his expression professional and discreet, as they entered the private elevator requiring a keycard for access. "Penthouse," David explained as the elevator began its smooth ascent. "I bought it for the light and the view. I never expected to actually enjoy living here." Why did you buy it then? Mary asked. It was expected, he replied with surprising candor. Success has its uniform and its approved addresses. I've only recently started questioning these assumptions. The elevator opened directly into his home, a vast open space where glass walls showcased Chicago's skyline and the dark expanse of Lake Michigan beyond. Minimalist furnishings in warm neutrals anchored the space without competing with the view. A few carefully selected art pieces adorned the walls, each lit with precision to highlight its qualities. Mary moved toward the windows, drawn by the city spread below like a map of possibilities. The lights of boats moved slowly across the lake's surface, creating ephemeral patterns that disappeared as quickly as they formed. This is beautiful, she said honestly. It came with excellent design credentials, David replied, standing beside her. But it never felt like home until recently when I started making it mine, rather than what designers thought it should be. He indicated subtle changes, bookshelves filled with actual books rather than decorative objects, a comfortable reading chair positioned to catch morning light, a small workspace with architectural drawings and models. Would you like something to drink? He offered. Water would be nice, Mary replied. David moved to the kitchen area, giving Mary a moment to absorb her surroundings and the unexpected turn her evening had taken. She observed how he moved in the space, confident but thoughtful, a man accustomed to luxury yet not defined by it. When David returned with 2 glasses of water, he found Mary examining a small architectural model on his desk, a community art center designed with sustainable materials. This is beautiful, she said, fingers hovering over the intricate details. Is it one of your projects? A personal one, he admitted. We're building it in the neighborhood where I grew up. The company board doesn't know yet. It won't generate the profit margins they expect. Mary looked up, seeing new dimensions to this man. Why do it then? Because children need spaces to discover who they are apart from circumstances they didn't choose, he replied simply. I had one teacher who showed me possibilities beyond my neighborhood. This might do that for others. They stood close now, the air between them charged with mutual recognition and growing desire. David set their glasses down, his fingers brushing hers as he took her hand. Mary, he said, her name almost a question. She met his gaze directly, allowing him to see her desire reflected in her eyes. He led her gently through the apartment to the bedroom doorway, where he paused. The room beyond featured the same stunning views, a large bed with simple linens, warm lighting that created a sense of sanctuary. David turned to face her, his expression serious. I want you to know that you can change your mind at any point. We can stop, talk, slow down, whatever you need. Mary appreciated his consideration, but knew her own mind. Still, his next words surprised her. Are you sure? He asked, his voice gentle. I will take care with you. I will listen. The question wasn't merely about consent, but about genuine comfort and readiness. Mary realized that despite his power and position, David approached this moment with unexpected humility. I'm sure, she replied, reaching up to touch his face. I want you. His expression softened with relief and deepening desire. Tell me what you like, he said. What makes you feel good? Mary felt a flush of vulnerability at the direct question. Her limited experience had never included such explicit communication. I'm not entirely sure, she admitted. This is new territory for me. Understanding dawned in David's eyes. We'll discover together then, he promised. Nothing happens that doesn't feel right for both of us. David's bedroom felt like a sanctuary high above the city, Chicago's, lights creating a gentle glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He dimmed the room's lighting further, creating an atmosphere of intimacy and calm. Their next kiss carried newfound meaning, a beginning rather than a question. His hands framed her face with gentle precision, thumbs tracing her cheekbones as though memorizing their contours. Mary's fingers worked at his tie, then the buttons of his shirt, each movement deliberate and exploratory. May I? He asked, his hands finding the zipper of her borrowed dress. She nodded, turning to allow him access. The fabric slipped away, pooling at her feet. David's intake of breath as he took in the sight of her standing in. Simple undergarments made her feel beautiful rather than exposed. You're exquisite, he said, voice dropping to a reverent whisper. Mary helped him remove his shirt, her fingers trailing over his chest and shoulders with artist's curiosity. His body revealed discipline and care, strong without ostentation, powerful without intimidation. He led her to the bed where they continued undressing each other with unhurried movements. Each newly revealed expanse of skin received attention, Kisses, gentle touches, appreciative words. David maintained constant awareness of her responses, adjusting his approach, based on her breathing, the tension in her muscles, the sounds she made. "Is this good?" he asked, as his lips traced her collarbone. "Yes," she whispered, amazed at how natural it felt to communicate her pleasure. When they were finally skin to skin, David continued his attentive approach. "Tell me if anything doesn't feel right," he said. "We have all night." His consideration made Mary feel safe enough to express both desire and uncertainty. When she tensed at an unexpected touch, he immediately shifted his approach. When she sighed with pleasure, he noted and returned to that discovery. "I want to make you feel wonderful," he murmured against her neck. "You already are," she assured him. Time lost meaning as they explored each other with increasing familiarity. David proved as attentive a lover as he had been a listener, focusing on Mary's pleasure with genuine interest rather than ego. He guided without dominating, suggested without demanding. When the moment came for their final union, he paused again. "Are you certain?" he asked, his eyes holding hers. "Completely," she answered. Their joining was slow, careful, her body adjusting to his presence, his patience allowing comfort to precede passion. When they began to move together, it felt like a conversation without words, a dance with naturally synchronized rhythms. Chicago's lights blurred beyond the windows as their world narrowed to touch, breath, and sensation. David maintained his focus on her experience, adjusting angles and pace to maximize her pleasure. When Mary's release finally came, it surprised her with its intensity, waves of sensation that left her breathless and trembling. David followed soon after, his composure finally breaking as he called her name. They remained connected, foreheads touching, breathing gradually slowing as they returned to awareness of the room around them. He kissed her gently before shifting to her side, one arm still holding her close. No awkwardness followed, only a peaceful silence as the city continued its nighttime rhythm beyond the windows. "Thank you," David said softly, tracing patterns on her shoulder. "For what?" Mary asked, turning to face him. "For trusting me with this," he replied. "For being authentic, when authenticity is rare." They talked quietly in the darkness, sharing thoughts and observations that seemed too intimate for daylight confession. Eventually, sleep claimed them both, their bodies curled together as though they'd found a configuration that had always been waiting for them. Neither could have anticipated how this night would alter the course of both their lives. Dawn crept across Lake Michigan, painting the water in gold and copper as Mary awakened in unfamiliar luxury. For a moment, disorientation clouded her mind before memories of the previous night flooded back. She turned carefully to find David still asleep beside her, his features softened. In repose, vulnerability replacing the confident mask he wore in waking hours. Morning light illuminated his bedroom with unforgiving clarity, highlighting details she'd missed in the intimate darkness. Framed architectural awards on a distant shelf, a watch casually set aside that probably cost more than her annual rent. A closet partially open to reveal suits with the distinct look of bespoke tailoring. Mary slipped from beneath Egyptian cotton sheets, wrapping herself in David's discarded dress shirt as she padded silently to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Chicago sprawled below, already buzzing with morning activity. Workers hurried into office buildings much like the one where David commanded boardrooms. Street vendors set up carts selling coffee to hurried commuters. The economic machinery of the city cranked into motion for another day. Somewhere in that landscape sat her tiny apartment above Gino's Deli, waiting with its leaky faucet and temperamental heating. Her afternoon art class needed preparation. Bills required paying. Reality awaited, indifferent to the magic of the previous night. She studied her reflection in the window glass, hair tousled, lips still, slightly swollen from his kisses, eyes bright with lingering pleasure. For one night she had stepped into David Hamilton's world of effortless luxury and genuine connection. But morning brought perspective, harsh and unavoidable. Their lives operated in different dimensions. He moved through spaces of power and influence, making decisions that affected thousands. His calendar probably filled with meetings alongside politicians and industry leaders. His concerns involved market fluctuations and investment strategies. Mary's world consisted of counting tips, stretching paint supplies to last another week, and explaining color theory to 8-year-olds at the community center. Her triumphs came in small increments, a painting technique mastered, rent paid on time, a student grasping a difficult concept. Last night they had found common ground in shared passions and unexpected chemistry. But passion faded. Chemistry evolved or dissolved. What remained were practicalities, the economic and social chasms between their daily existences. She watched a private helicopter land on a distant rooftop helipad, another reminder of the rarefied air David inhabited. Such different planets they occupied, briefly aligned for one beautiful night before continuing on separate orbits. Mary turned back to watch David sleeping peacefully. His chest rose and fell with deep, even breaths. One arm extended across the space she had occupied, as though unconsciously reaching for her. The intimacy of the sight squeezed her heart. She could stay, could wait for him to wake, could share breakfast and extend this unexpected connection into daylight hours. The temptation pulled at her with surprising force. But what would follow? Awkward conversations about seeing each other again? False promises made with good intentions? The inevitable moment when reality intruded, when his assistant called about an urgent meeting, or when she needed to leave for her shift at the coffee shop? Better to preserve what they'd shared as a perfect memory than watch it deteriorate under practical pressures. Better to leave cleanly than force something beautiful to contort itself into everyday complications. Mary gathered her clothes silently, slipping into the bathroom to dress. The marble expanse reminded her again of the disparity between their lives. Her tiny bathroom at home barely fit a shower stall. She splashed water on her face and used her fingers to tame her hair into something presentable. Her borrowed black dress looked rumpled but passable. She'd return it to Kiana washed and pressed, along with stories of an unexpected auction success, but nothing about what followed. Some experiences belonged solely to those who lived them. With one last glance at David's sleeping form, Mary made her decision final. She would leave now, while she still possessed the courage, while she could still walk away with dignity and self-respect intact, while the night remained perfect in memory rather than complicated by morning after uncertainties. She moved through the penthouse silently, collecting her small purse from where it had been abandoned during their passionate entrance hours earlier. The spacious living area looked different in morning light, less intimidating, more obviously. A space designed for appearance rather than comfort, despite David's personal touches. At the elevator, Mary hesitated, second-guessing her decision. But clarity reasserted itself. Their worlds would never align naturally. Any attempt to force such alignment would require one of them to compromise their essential nature. She pressed the button and stepped inside when the doors opened, not allowing herself to look back. Before leaving, Mary found herself drawn to David's desk. The architectural model of his community arts center project stood as evidence of depth beyond his successful facade. A man who remembered his roots despite his rise. This complexity made leaving harder and more necessary. A simple mutual attraction might have been easier to categorize and dismiss, but their connection had revealed layers that threatened her certainty. Mary located a sleek silver pen and expensive cream stationery embossed with subtle Hamilton Group letterhead. The irony wasn't lost on her, using the symbols of his corporate identity to end their personal connection. She considered what to write, how much to express. Lengthy explanations felt excessive, cryptic brevity seemed cold. What words could possibly capture the unexpected significance of their encounter while acknowledging its necessary conclusion? Mary wrote carefully, her artist's hand forming deliberate letters. "Thank you for a beautiful night. Our lives are different. Please keep this as a good memory, Mary." She read it twice, testing its tone and meaning. The note offered gratitude without regret, acknowledged reality without bitterness, and closed the door without slamming it. The words felt right, honest without cruelty, clear without coldness. She propped the note against a crystal paperweight where he would easily find it. For a moment, she considered adding her phone number, providing an opening for him to reach out. But that would contradict her purpose. Clean breaks healed faster than prolonged separations. The elevator doors closed on the penthouse view. As the car descended toward the lobby, Mary felt simultaneous relief and loss. She had preserved both their dignities by acknowledging what they both surely knew. Some connections, however genuine, belonged to specific moments rather than extended timelines. Her note would allow him to remember their night without obligation or awkwardness. A beautiful experience preserved in amber rather than stretched until it broke. The morning air felt brisk against Mary's face as she emerged from David's building. Early commuters hurried past, focused on coffee cups and smartphone screens. No one noticed the woman in yesterday's dress, stepping from luxury back into ordinary existence. Mary caught a bus rather than splurging on a rideshare she couldn't afford. The vehicle rumbled through morning traffic, carrying her from Gold Coast opulence toward her River North reality. Fellow passengers looked tired, resigned to another workday. She wondered how many had experienced something extraordinary hours earlier. Her apartment welcomed her with familiar smells: linseed oil, coffee grounds, the faint mustiness of an old building. The contrast between this space and David's penthouse struck her anew. Her futon remained unfolded from yesterday morning, paintbrushes soaked in jars, bills stacked beside her laptop. After showering, Mary changed into her coffee shop uniform, black pants, and a branded polo shirt that had faded from too many washings. Life resumed its established rhythms as though nothing transformative had occurred. At Lakefront Coffee, she served business people rushing between meetings, students hunched over laptops and tourists consulting maps. Her body performed familiar motions while her mind replayed moments from the previous night. David's thoughtful questions about her art, his gentle hands, the way he'd looked at her with genuine interest rather than assessment. "You seem different today," commented her coworker Jess during a brief lull. "Something happened at that fancy art thing." "My painting sold," Mary replied truthfully, if incompletely. "For more than I expected." Days passed, blending into weeks. Mary worked her shifts, taught her classes, and painted in her studio hours. She deposited David's generous payment when the gallery transferred the funds. The money provided breathing room, repairs for her ancient computer, quality art supplies, even a small emergency fund. Sometimes she caught herself checking business news, scanning for his name. Once, she spotted him in a newspaper photograph at a downtown development announcement. He looked exactly as she remembered, yet somehow like a character from a movie she'd once enjoyed, connected to her experience but separate from her reality. Sleep proved treacherous. In dreams, she returned to his penthouse, to his arms. She woke reaching for someone who wasn't there, then laughed at her own melodrama. One night didn't justify such lingering effects. Adults had encounters that remained just that, encounters, not foundations for improbable relationships. Painting helped most. Mary channeled her confused emotions into new work, still focused on transitional, light, but with deeper contrasts and more complex emotional undertones. Her gallery representative noticed the evolution, commenting on the newfound emotional resonance in her recent pieces. Life continued. Mary existed, but something had shifted inside her, a recalibration of what connection could feel like, a new standard against which other experiences were measured. Have you ever experienced a moment that seemed to exist outside your regular life? A perfect connection that logic told you couldn't last? Mary's choice to leave represents something many of us face, the struggle between protecting our hearts and risking them for potential happiness. I'd love to hear about times you've had to make difficult choices about relationships in your own lives. Share your stories in the comments below. Did you walk away like Mary, or did you take a different path? Your experiences might help others facing similar crossroads. If you're finding this story meaningful, please hit that like button. It helps others discover these narratives about the complex choices we make in matters of the heart. Now, let's return to Mary's life, where an unexpected development is about to change everything. As November turned to December, Chicago transformed with holiday decorations and early snowfall. Mary found herself unusually tired, attributing her exhaustion to increased holiday hours at the coffee shop and year-end projects at the community center. When nausea joined the fatigue, she blamed a stomach virus circulating among her students. But as weeks passed and symptoms persisted, a different possibility emerged, one that would reconnect her with David Hamilton in ways neither could have anticipated. The calendar on Mary's kitchen wall showed mid-December, exactly 6 weeks since the charity gala. Outside, Chicago had transformed into a winter wonderland, with holiday lights reflecting off fresh snow. Inside her small apartment, Mary sat on the edge of her bathtub, staring at her phone's calendar app with growing concern. "This can't be happening," she whispered, counting days again. Her period, always regular, always predictable, was now 12 days late. For the past week, she'd attributed her fatigue to extra holiday shifts at the coffee shop. The occasional waves of nausea seemed likely due to the stomach bug circulating among her art students. Even her unusual food aversions had a reasonable explanation: stress from year-end financial pressures affecting her appetite. But 12 days late couldn't be explained away so easily. Mary had stopped at the drugstore on her way home, purchasing the test with cash rather than card, irrationally worried about creating a digital record of this moment. The cashier had barely glanced at her, too busy with the holiday shopping rush to notice her flushed face and nervous hands. Now the small box sat unopened on her bathroom counter, its presence demanding acknowledgement. "It's probably nothing," she told her reflection in the mirror. Stress can affect cycles, so can changes in routine, but a persistent inner voice reminded her of statistics and biology. One night, one man, no protection beyond his assurance of testing and her knowledge of her cycle, a calculated risk that had seemed reasonable in the moment. Mary's hands trembled as she opened the box, reading instructions she already understood. The clinical language provided momentary distance from the emotional weight of the situation. Collect sample, wait 3 minutes. 1 line negative, 2 lines positive. Simple chemistry determining complex futures. The plastic applicator felt cool against her palm as she followed the procedure. Setting the test flat on the counter, she started the timer on her phone and stepped back, unable to watch the liquid travel across the test window. Those 3 minutes stretched into eternity. Mary paced the tiny bathroom, 5 steps in each direction, her mind racing through possibilities. What if it was positive? What if it wasn't? Which outcome did she actually want? The questions tumbled over each other without resolution. The timer's soft chime startled her despite her anticipation. Mary closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and looked down. 2 pink lines. Clear, undeniable, definitive. The test slipped from Mary's fingers and hit the bathroom tile. 2 pink lines. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the plastic stick that had just rewritten her future. 25 years old, a struggling artist, and now pregnant after one night with a man whose world existed in a different orbit from hers. Mary pressed her back against the cool bathroom door and slid to the floor, her hands trembling as reality crashed over her. One night, one choice, one life now growing inside her. "Oh God," she whispered, wrapping her arms around her still flat stomach. "What do I do now?" She remained there until her legs grew numb, the positive test lying on the floor as irrefutable evidence of changed circumstances. Eventually, practicality asserted itself. A home test could be wrong. She needed medical confirmation before making any decisions or plans. With shaking fingers, Mary searched for nearby clinics on her phone, finding a women's health center that accepted her limited insurance. They had an appointment available the following morning, a cancellation that seemed like the universe's acknowledgement of her urgent need for answers. That night, Mary barely slept. Her hand kept drifting to her abdomen, trying to connect with the reality that might be developing within. By morning, exhaustion had dulled her anxiety to a manageable hum as she dressed in simple jeans and a sweater for her appointment. "One step at a time," she told herself as she locked her apartment door. "Just get through today." The women's health clinic occupied the 2nd floor of a medical building in Lincoln Park. The waiting room featured calming blue walls and educational posters about reproductive health. Mary completed paperwork with mechanical precision, checking boxes and providing dates while her mind remained partially disconnected from the process. Mary Adams? A nurse in colorful scrubs called her name after a 30-minute wait that had simultaneously felt like seconds and hours. Basic procedures came first: weight, blood pressure, temperature, questions about medical history and last menstrual period. Mary answered automatically, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. The nurse's kind efficiency carried her through these preliminaries and into an examination room where Dr. Patel would see her shortly. Dr. Patel entered 10 minutes later, a woman in her 40s with gentle eyes and a direct manner that Mary immediately appreciated. "So, you've had a positive home pregnancy test and missed period," she confirmed, reviewing Mary's intake information. "When was your last sexual encounter?" 6 weeks ago, Mary replied. "November 3rd. It was a one-time situation." Dr. Patel nodded without judgment. "We'll do a blood test to confirm the pregnancy, but I'd also like to perform an ultrasound today if that's all right with you. At 6 weeks, we should be able to see the gestational sac and possibly detect cardiac activity." Mary's heart raced at the mention of cardiac activity, the clinical term making the situation suddenly, viscerally real. She nodded agreement, trying to keep her breathing steady. After a blood draw and urine sample, Mary changed into a paper gown and waited on the examination table, the paper covering crinkling with each nervous shift of her weight. Dr. Patel returned with an ultrasound machine, explaining each step as she prepared the equipment. "This will be a transvaginal ultrasound," she explained. "It provides clearer images in early pregnancy than the abdominal approach. You'll feel some pressure, but it shouldn't be painful." Mary fixed her gaze on the ceiling tiles as Dr. Patel proceeded with the examination. The ultrasound wand creating uncomfortable but manageable pressure. The doctor's focus shifted between Mary's face and the screen, her expression professionally neutral. "Yes, you are definitely pregnant," Dr. Patel confirmed. "Based on measurements and your last period, I'd estimate you're at approximately 6 weeks gestation." Mary had expected this confirmation, yet hearing it spoken aloud sent a fresh wave of reality washing over her. Her pregnancy was no longer a possibility indicated by a drugstore test, but a medical fact confirmed by a professional. Dr. Patel adjusted the ultrasound wand slightly, her brow furrowing in concentration. "Interesting," she murmured, eyes fixed on the screen. "What is it?" Mary asked, alarm rising in her chest. "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong," Dr. Patel replied, turning the screen so Mary could see. "But I'm seeing 2 distinct gestational sacs, each with cardiac activity. You're carrying twins." Mary stared at the screen, unable to process the doctor's words immediately. 2 small oval shapes appeared as dark bubbles against the gray background. Within each, a tiny flickering light pulsed rhythmically. "Twins?" Mary whispered, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. "Yes," Dr. Patel confirmed. "Fraternal twins, from the appearance of separate sacs. Each developing normally for this stage, each with their own heartbeat." "Heartbeats," Mary repeated, fixating on the pulsing lights on the screen. Those weren't just abstract shapes, they were lives. 2 lives, growing inside her body, created from one unexpected night with David Hamilton. Dr. Patel printed several images from the ultrasound, pointing out features Mary could barely distinguish. "These are for you to keep," she said, handing over the grainy black and white photos. "We'll want to see you back in 2 weeks. Twin pregnancies require more monitoring than singleton pregnancies." The remainder of the appointment passed in a blur of information. Prenatal vitamins, dietary recommendations, warning signs to watch for, scheduling for the next visit. Mary nodded and collected pamphlets, her mind still struggling to grasp. The essential fact, she wasn't just pregnant, she was carrying twins. As she left the clinic with ultrasound photos in her purse, the December wind bit at her cheeks, grounding her in physical sensation when her emotions seemed too overwhelming to process. The L train carried Mary home through Chicago's winter landscape, the city continuing its normal rhythms while her internal world underwent seismic shifts. She sat with the ultrasound photos in her lap, studying the grainy images of 2 distinct sacs, each containing a tiny flickering life. Fear came first, immediate and practical. Her financial situation barely sustained her own needs. How could she possibly support 2 additional lives? Her apartment had barely enough space for her painting supplies, let alone cribs and all the necessities twins would require. Her jobs offered no maternity leave, no security for time away. "I can't do this," she whispered, drawing a concerned glance from an elderly woman seated nearby. Yet even as fear threatened to overwhelm her, another emotion emerged. A surprising instinctive joy that bubbled up from somewhere deep within. 2 lives had begun. 2 hearts beat inside her body. The miracle of this biological reality transcended her practical concerns for one breathtaking moment. Back in her apartment, Mary placed the ultrasound photos on her refrigerator with alphabet magnets left from the previous tenant. The black and white images looked surreal against her grocery list and coffee shop schedule. She made tea and sat cross-legged on her futon, notebook in hand, attempting to organize her thoughts. Lists usually helped her manage overwhelming situations. She wrote options at the top of the page, then stared at the blank space below. Termination existed as a legal choice, but as Mary considered it, her hand instinctively moved to her abdomen. The flickering heartbeats she'd seen on the ultrasound screen had changed something fundamental in her perception. These weren't abstract possibilities, but specific lives already in progress. Adoption represented another path, giving the twins a family with resources she couldn't provide. Mary researched agencies on her laptop, reading testimonials from birth mothers. Their stories of difficult choices made from love resonated with her, yet also prompted unexpected possessiveness. These were her children, hers and David's. David Hamilton. The thought of him complicated everything. A man she'd known for one night. A man who lived in a different social and economic universe. A man who had no idea he had created 2 lives with her. The question of keeping and raising the twins herself seemed simultaneously the most frightening and most natural option. Mary had never particularly planned on motherhood, at least not until her career stabilized. Yet now, faced with its unexpected arrival, she found herself calculating possibilities rather than rejecting the idea outright. Days passed in this emotional whirlwind. Mary continued working her shifts and teaching her classes while exhaustion dragged at her body and morning sickness ambushed her at unpredictable intervals. She learned to carry crackers everywhere and discovered that ginger tea helped settle her stomach. At night she found herself talking to the twins, an instinctive behavior that surprised her. "We'll figure this out," she promised the darkness. Somehow, her friend Kiana noticed changes during their weekly coffee date. "You're different lately," she observed. "Everything okay?" Mary considered confiding in her, then hesitated. Sharing the news would make it more real, would invite questions about the father, would transform private consideration into public knowledge. "Just tired," she replied instead. "End-of-year stuff." As December progressed, Mary's uncertainty gradually gave way to determination. Whatever path she chose would require courage and planning. She began researching prenatal care, twin development, financial assistance programs. Knowledge provided illusion of control when circumstances seemed beyond her influence. By Christmas, alone in her apartment with a tiny artificial tree, Mary made a preliminary decision. She would continue the pregnancy. She would prepare as though she would raise these children herself, while remaining open to other possibilities if they proved necessary. She would take one day at a time while planning for a future that now included 2 additional lives. With this framework established, one question remained unavoidable. What about David Hamilton? The question of David haunted Mary through the holiday season. His presence in her mind contrasted sharply with his absence from her life. She found herself studying the ultrasound photos, trying to imagine these children's features. Would they have his green eyes? Her artistic sensibility? His height? Her determination? On New Year's Eve, while others celebrated fresh beginnings, Mary confronted the ethical dimensions of her situation. Did David have a right to know about the twins? Did the twins have a right to know their father? She made 2 columns in her journal, reasons to tell him and reasons not to tell him. Under reasons to tell him, she wrote, "He is their biological father. They deserve to know their complete heritage. He might want to be involved. He has resources that could benefit them. Hiding this information seems dishonest. Medical history matters." Under reasons not to tell him, he might reject involvement completely. He might contest my decisions. He might feel trapped or manipulated. Our worlds are incompatible, he stated. He doesn't. Do families' potential legal complications? Mary reviewed the lists multiple times, adding and crossing out points as new considerations occurred to her. Ultimately, the ethical question distilled to its essence, regardless of his potential reaction. Did David deserve to know he had created 2 lives? The answer, when she finally admitted it to herself, was yes. Whatever came afterward, rejection, support, legal issues, or something unexpected, began with his right to this fundamental information about his own biological children. This conclusion brought no relief, only the heavy certainty of difficult conversations ahead. Mary had no delusions about fairy tale endings. David Hamilton had made his position on accidents clear on that night months ago when she'd seen his name on a business magazine at the dentist's office. An article had mentioned his reputation for avoiding serious relationships and focusing exclusively on his corporate expansion. Still, people could surprise you. People could change. She had changed already, her priorities shifting as she accepted the reality of impending motherhood. At minimum, the twins deserved her attempt to inform their father of their existence. What he chose to do with that information would be his decision, a decision he could only make if given the facts. Mary placed protective hands over her still flat abdomen. "We'll tell him," she promised the twins. "Whatever happens after that, we'll handle together." Deciding to inform David, and actually doing so, represented entirely different levels of difficulty. Mary found herself procrastinating through early January, rehearsing potential conversations that inevitably ended with imagined rejection or conflict. How does one even begin such a conversation? "Remember me from 2 months ago?" "Surprise, you're going to be a father to twins." Every approach she conceived sounded absurd or accusatory. She considered writing a letter, sending an email, even having her doctor make the contact. Each method seemed either too impersonal or too cowardly. News of this magnitude deserved direct communication. Finding David's contact information proved surprisingly easy. The Hamilton Group website listed corporate headquarters in downtown Chicago. As CEO, his office would undoubtedly be there. She could simply walk in and request to see him. Except nothing about this situation was simple. Corporate buildings had security protocols. Administrative assistants screened visitors. Mary had no appointment, No business reason that would grant her access to one of Chicago's most prominent executives. She monitored business news, hoping for information about public events. He might attend where she could approach him more naturally. The Hamilton Group announced a groundbreaking ceremony for a new development, but security would be tight, the setting public. Privacy mattered for this conversation. 2 more weeks passed. Mary entered her 10th week of pregnancy. Morning sickness intensified. The window for first trimester decisions narrowed. She needed to act. On a Tuesday morning in mid-January, Mary called in sick to the coffee shop. She spent an hour selecting appropriate clothing, professional enough to be taken seriously in, a corporate environment, comfortable enough to accommodate her increasingly sensitive stomach. She settled on a simple gray dress with a navy cardigan, clothes that conveyed respect without pretension. The Hamilton Group occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming skyscraper on Wacker Drive. Mary rehearsed her approach during the L-ride downtown, running through possible scenarios and responses. By the time she entered the building's soaring lobby, her heart pounded so forcefully she wondered if others could hear it. The security desk represented the first hurdle. Mary approached with feigned confidence, making direct eye contact with the uniformed guard. "Good morning. I need to see David Hamilton, please." The guard's expression remained professionally neutral. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Mary admitted, "but it's a personal matter of significant importance. Please tell him Mary Adams is here." "Mr. Hamilton doesn't take unscheduled meetings," the guard explained, not unkindly. "You can contact his office to arrange an appointment." Mary had anticipated this response. "Please," she said, lowering her voice. "Just tell him I'm here. If he refuses to see me, I'll leave immediately." Something in her expression, perhaps the combination of determination and vulnerability, seemed to reach the guard. He studied her for a moment, then nodded once. "And, wait here," he said, picking up his phone. Mary stood with rigid posture, fighting waves of nausea that stress had intensified. After a brief conversation, the guard replaced the receiver and looked up with mild surprise. "His assistant will come down for you," he informed her, handing over a visitor badge. "Please wear this visibly." 20 minutes later, a polished woman in her 40s appeared from the elevator. "Miss Adams? I'm Grace Chen, Mr. Hamilton's executive assistant. Please come with me." The elevator ascended silently to the 50th floor. Grace offered no conversation beyond basic courtesy, giving Mary space to collect her thoughts and steady her breathing. When the doors opened, they revealed an expansive reception area, decorated in muted tones of gray and blue. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Chicago's skyline, the frozen expanse of Lake Michigan visible in the distance. "This way," Grace directed, leading Mary down a corridor lined with abstract artwork. They stopped before double doors of dark wood. Grace knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for response. "Miss Adams to see you, Mr. Hamilton." Mary stepped into a spacious office dominated by a desk of polished walnut and more spectacular views of the city. And there he was, David Hamilton, rising from his chair as she entered, surprise evident in his expression despite his professional composure. "Mary," he said, her name carrying a wealth of unasked questions. "I thought I'd dreamed you." Grace quietly closed the door, leaving them alone with the weight of all that remained unsaid. Mary took a deep breath, her hand instinctively moving to her abdomen, where 2 hearts beat beneath her own. "We need to talk," she said simply. Hamilton Tower dominated the Chicago skyline, its glass exterior reflecting clouds and sky like a vertical mirror rising from the urban landscape. From the outside, it projected power, wealth, and inaccessibility, much like the man whose name adorned the building. Mary's reflection distorted in the polished marble floor of the vast lobby as she approached the security desk. The space felt deliberately intimidating. Soaring ceilings, minimalist furniture and muted grays and blues, and uniformed personnel who assessed visitors with practiced neutrality. "Good morning. I need to see David Hamilton, please," Mary stated, summoning confidence she didn't feel. The security guard's expression remained impassive. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," she admitted, "but it's a personal matter of significant importance. Please tell him Mary Adams is here." "Mr. Hamilton doesn't take unscheduled meetings," the guard explained with practiced politeness. "You can contact his office to arrange an appointment." Mary had anticipated this response, but couldn't retreat now. "Please," she said, lowering her voice, "just tell him I'm here. If he refuses to see me, I'll leave immediately." Something in her expression, Perhaps the unusual combination of determination and vulnerability seemed to register with the guard. He studied her briefly before picking up his phone. The minutes that followed stretched endlessly as Mary stood with rigid posture, fighting waves of morning sickness intensified by anxiety. Her hand instinctively moved to her abdomen, a protective gesture that had become habit in recent weeks. After a brief conversation, the guard replaced the receiver and looked up with evident surprise. "His assistant will come down for you," he informed her, handing over a visitor badge. "Please wear this visibly." Mary clipped the badge to her cardigan, wondering what David had said when informed of her presence. Had he been curious? Concerned? Annoyed at the interruption? The main elevator bank required keycard access, so Mary waited in a visitor. His area furnished with sleek leather chairs and corporate magazines. A display case showcased architectural models of Hamilton Group developments, gleaming. Miniature versions of buildings that had transformed Chicago's urban landscape. 20 minutes later, a woman in her 40s emerged from a private elevator. Her tailored suit and confident bearing marked her as someone accustomed to authority. "Miss Adams, I'm Grace Chen, Mr. Hamilton's executive assistant. Please come with me." The private elevator ascended smoothly to the 50th floor, its walls lined with backlit panels displaying the Hamilton Group logo. Grace offered no conversation beyond basic courtesy, giving Mary space to collect her thoughts and steady her breathing. The elevator opened directly into a reception area designed to impress. Original artwork on walls, custom furniture, arranged in conversational groupings, and a curved desk where another assistant monitored calls and visitors. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Chicago's spread below like a living map, the frozen expanse of Lake Michigan visible in the distance. "This way," Grace directed, leading Mary down a corridor where glass-walled conference rooms alternated with executive offices. They stopped before double doors of dark walnut. Grace knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for response. "Miss Adams to see you, Mr. Hamilton." David Hamilton's office occupied the building's northeast corner, providing panoramic views of the city and lake through floor-to-ceiling windows. Unlike the deliberately intimidating public spaces below, this room reflected personal taste, bookcases filled with architectural volumes, and literature classics, models of innovative buildings, photographs of construction milestones rather than society events. David stood behind a substantial desk of polished walnut, silhouetted against the winter sky. His charcoal suit fit with custom precision, his posture projecting the confidence of a man accustomed to command. Yet as Mary entered, surprise disrupted his composed expression. "Mary," he said, her name carrying a wealth of unasked questions. "I thought I'd dreamed you." Grace quietly closed the door, leaving them alone with the weight of all that remained unsaid. The air between them seemed charged with memory and uncertainty. "It's been a while," Mary offered, struggling to find an appropriate beginning for this impossible conversation. 10 weeks, David replied precisely. "I've found your note." The reference to her departure hung between them, her deliberate choice to end what had barely begun, her recognition of the fundamental differences in their lives. That choice now seemed almost quaint in light of biological reality. "Would you like to sit?" David gestured to leather chairs positioned near the windows, moving from behind his desk in a gesture that equalized their positions somewhat. Mary took the offered seat, grateful for its solidity as vertigo briefly threatened her composure. David sat opposite her, their knees almost touching in the intimate arrangement of furniture. This close, she could detect subtle changes since their night together, new lines around his, eyes suggesting recent stress, a slight tension in his shoulders absent in her memories. "I've thought about you," he admitted unexpectedly. "Wondered if I should try to find you. Why didn't you?" The question escaped before she could consider its relevance to her purpose here. "Your note was clear," he answered simply. "You believed our lives were too different. I respected your assessment." The honest response disarmed her momentarily. She had prepared for corporate coldness, for the busy executive annoyed by personal interruption. This thoughtful acknowledgement of her choice complicated her narrative. "I meant it then," Mary said carefully. "Our worlds don't naturally intersect. Yet here you are," David observed, his gaze direct but unreadable. Mary drew a steadying breath. The moment had arrived, no perfect transition existed, no gentle way to deliver life-altering news. "We need to talk," she said simply. David leaned forward slightly, giving her his complete attention. The gesture reminded her of that first night at the gala, when he had focused entirely on her paintings while others merely glanced and moved on. That capacity for concentration had attracted her then. Now it made her disclosure more intimidating. "I'm listening," he said when she hesitated. Mary reached into her bag and withdrew the ultrasound photos, holding them, a moment before placing them on the small table between their chairs. The black and white images seemed stark and clinical in the elegant office setting. "I'm 8 weeks pregnant," she said, voice steady despite her racing heart. "Twins." The words hung in the air between them, irrevocable and transformative. David's expression shifted through multiple emotions: surprise, disbelief, calculation, before settling into careful neutrality. His gaze moved from her face to the ultrasound images and back again. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. "Say something," Mary finally requested. David's posture changed subtly, shoulders squaring, jaw tightening, eyes becoming more analytical than personal. The transition was visible, a protective armor assembling itself piece by piece. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the measured tone she imagined he used in difficult negotiations. "Are you sure they're mine?" The question hit Mary like a physical blow. Of all possible responses, this direct challenge to her integrity hadn't featured in her imagined scenarios. Heat rushed to her face as multiple emotions collided: indignation, hurt, anger. "Yes," she replied, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "You are the only man I have ever been with." David's expression remained carefully neutral, but something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps at this unexpected information. Still, he maintained his protective distance. "You understand I need to verify that claim," he stated, the words delivered without inflection. "This is a significant matter with potential legal and financial implications." Mary felt herself transforming from person to problem before his eyes, from Mary Adams, artist, and individual with whom he'd shared intimacy, to unnamed threat requiring management. The shift felt dehumanizing. "I'm not here for your money," she said firmly. "I'm here because you have a right to know, and because these children have a right to know their father." "Children," he repeated, the plural form seemingly amplifying his caution. "Twins, yes, fraternal twins, each with their own amniotic sac, each with their own heartbeat." David's gaze dropped to the ultrasound photos, studying them with the focused attention he might give architectural plans or investment prospectuses. His finger briefly touched one of the white smudges representing a developing heart. "And you're certain about the timing? 8 weeks?" "Yes. Conception occurred the night we spent together." Dr. Patel confirmed the dating through measurements and development markers. The clinical language created emotional distance, allowing them both to retreat behind terminology rather than confront the human reality their connection had created. David stood abruptly, moving to the window with his back to her. His reflection in the glass revealed tightly controlled features. "I'll need to consult my attorney," he said, voice cooler than before. "There will be paternity testing, of course. Once confirmed, we can discuss arrangements." "Arrangements," Mary repeated, the word hollow and insufficient. "These are lives, David, not a business transaction." He turned back toward her, his expression now fully transformed into the corporate mask she'd seen in business magazine photographs. "Everything in life involves transactions and arrangements, Miss Adams. Pretending otherwise is naive." The formal address stung more than his question about paternity. This calculated distancing strategy revealed his emotional response more clearly than anger would have. David Hamilton was afraid. David returned to his seat, maintaining professional composure while clearly establishing emotional boundaries. His posture communicated defense against an unexpected threat rather than openness to life-changing news. "Let me be direct," he said, voice lowered but firm. "I don't do families. I don't do accidents." The declaration hung between them like a wall constructed in real time. Mary had anticipated rejection, but not this specific formulation, the reduction of human connection to inconvenient categories he simply opted out of through personal policy. "These aren't abstract concepts," Mary replied, fighting to keep disappointment from overwhelming her voice. "These are your children. They exist. They're growing. They have heartbeats I've heard and seen." "Biological reality doesn't automatically create obligation," David countered, his tone suggesting a legal rather than moral framework. "People make reproductive choices every day." "Yes, they do," Mary agreed. "And I've made mine. I'm continuing this pregnancy. I will raise these children. I'm not here to demand anything from you. I'm here because honesty and integrity required that I inform you." David's eyes narrowed slightly. "If you're not seeking financial support, What exactly do you want? The question revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of her purpose. In his world of transactions and strategic positioning, genuine ethical obligation without agenda seemed implausible. I wanted you to know, Mary said simply. What you choose to do with that knowledge is your decision, and if I choose to have no involvement? His question came quickly, revealing the path he already leaned toward. Mary had prepared for this possibility during sleepless nights. Then these children will grow up knowing I made every effort to include you, but you made your choice. They will know half their genetic heritage, but not the man who provided it. Her words carried no threat or manipulation, only the straightforward presentation of consequences. David seemed momentarily taken aback by her lack of emotional leverage attempts. Children complicate everything, he said after a moment, his tone slightly less formal. My life, my work, doesn't have room for that complexity. Neither did mine, Mary acknowledged. But reality rarely consults our preferences. David stood again, moving behind his desk in a subtle reassertion of authority and distance. He pressed a button on his phone system. Grace, clear my afternoon, and contact Lawson's office. I need a meeting as soon as possible. The mechanical aspects of response seemed to steady him. Problem identification, resource allocation, timeline establishment. Mary recognized the retreat into familiar patterns when emotional territory proved threatening. I'll have my attorneys draft an agreement, he continued, not meeting her eyes. Financial support can be arranged discreetly. I assume you'll want health insurance coverage and appropriate prenatal care. What I want, Mary said quietly, is for you to recognize that spreadsheets and legal documents can't adequately address this situation. These are your children, David, not a public relations problem to manage. David's expression hardened at her comment, jaw tightening visibly. I'm being perfectly reasonable, he stated. I'm offering practical solutions rather than emotional platitudes. Children require financial resources, which I can provide without difficulty. Mary stood slowly, gathering her bag and leaving the ultrasound photos on the table. Money isn't the only resource children need, she said. But I didn't come here to persuade you of anything. I came to inform you of reality. What you do with that information reflects your character, not mine. She moved toward the door, disappointment weighing her steps, but dignity straightening her spine. She had fulfilled her ethical obligation. The rest belonged to him. My assistant will contact you to arrange the next steps, David said, his voice regaining its professional neutrality. We'll need to establish paternity formally before proceeding with any arrangements. Mary turned at the door, one hand on the handle. I understand your caution, she acknowledged, but your fundamental question reveals how little you know me, despite the intimacy we shared. I didn't come here to trap you or extort you. I came here because integrity demanded it. David's expression flickered briefly, a momentary crack in his corporate armor, quickly sealed. I have responsibilities to my company, my shareholders. I can't allow personal situations to interfere with those obligations. Those aren't your only responsibilities, Mary replied softly. But I recognize your choice. I won't contact you again. She opened the door, then paused for one final statement. I am not asking for anything except basic human decency. Please don't contact me unless you plan to be human. With those words, Mary walked out, closing the door quietly behind her. Grace looked up from her desk with professional neutrality, though her eyes held a hint of curiosity about the woman who had secured an unscheduled meeting with her notoriously inaccessible boss. Do you need assistance finding your way out? Grace asked. No, thank you, Mary replied. I remember the way. The private elevator carried her down 50 floors from the rarefied atmosphere of executive power to the ground-level reality where most lives unfolded. As she crossed the marble lobby toward the revolving doors, Mary felt simultaneous grief and relief. Grief for the father her children might never know. Relief that she had acted with integrity regardless of outcome. Outside, January wind cut through her cardigan. Mary wrapped her arms around herself, hands automatically finding her, abdomen in the protective gesture that had become second nature. It's just us for now, she whispered to the twins. But we'll be okay. January faded into February, bringing deeper cold and earlier sunsets to Chicago. Mary's life settled into new rhythms, dictated by her changing body and growing responsibilities. The twins made their presence known through constant fatigue and unpredictable waves of nausea that seemed to mock the term morning sickness by appearing at all hours. At Lakefront Coffee, Mary learned to position herself near the back door for quick escapes to the alley when nausea struck suddenly. Her manager Rick noticed her frequent bathroom breaks and pallor but asked. No questions, simply scheduling her for fewer opening shifts when possible. Mary appreciated his quiet consideration without knowing whether it stemmed from suspicion about her condition or general kindness. You can take your break now, he'd say during busy afternoons, noticing her increased fatigue before she acknowledged it herself. I've got the counter. The community center presented different challenges. Teaching art to energetic children required physical stamina that diminished as her pregnancy progressed. The classroom's paint smell, once pleasant and familiar, now triggered immediate queasiness. Mary brought peppermint oil to dab under her nose and learned to demonstrate techniques with windows open despite winter chill. Miss Adams, why do you wear so many sweaters? 8-year-old Zoe asked during a watercolor lesson. Artists need to stay warm to keep their creativity flowing, Mary answered with a smile, not mentioning that pregnancy had altered her body temperature along with everything else. Between shifts, Mary researched prenatal nutrition, squeezing extra protein and vitamins into her limited budget. She carried almonds and cheese sticks in her bag, eating small portions throughout the day to maintain energy and combat nausea. Her schedule allowed minimal rest, mornings at the coffee shop, afternoons teaching. Evenings painting commission pieces that provided crucial additional income. The physical demands of pregnancy collided with financial necessity, creating days that stretched her endurance to its limits. Yet even as exhaustion became her constant companion, Mary found unexpected moments of connection with the twins developing within. During quiet moments on the L train between jobs, she'd place her hand on her slightly rounded abdomen, communicating silently with these new lives. We're doing this together, she'd whisper, when the train noise provided privacy for her one-sided conversations. One day at a time, her body changed gradually. Waistbands tightened, bras grew uncomfortable, familiar movements required adjustment. Mary adapted her wardrobe with thrift store finds and strategic layering. She maintained her independence fiercely, never complaining, even as each day demanded more energy than she could easily replenish. In those first weeks after confronting David, pride and determination carried Mary forward. She had walked away with dignity intact. She would continue with the same resolve, creating a life for herself and her children without his involvement. The path ahead looked steep and uncertain, but Mary climbed steadily, one challenging day after another. You're what? Kiana's voice rose sharply before she caught herself, glancing around the small cafe where they'd met for Sunday brunch. Sorry, but twins? From that art gala guy, the CEO? Mary nodded, relieved to finally share her secret. After 12 weeks of pregnancy, her doctor had confirmed the reduced risk of miscarriage, making this the right time to widen her circle of support. David Hamilton, she confirmed quietly. It was just one night. Kiana processed this information with widened eyes, fork suspended halfway to her mouth. Well, damn. When you break your dry spell, you really go all out. The unexpected humor broke Mary's tension, prompting genuine laughter for the first time in weeks. Kiana reached across the table, squeezing Mary's hand with immediate acceptance. That meant more than elaborate expressions of support could have. Tell me everything, she insisted, starting with how you're feeling. Their 3-hour conversation covered medical details, emotional upheaval, and the disastrous meeting with David. Kiana listened without judgment, asking practical questions and offering observations that helped clarify Mary's own thoughts. So he went full corporate robot on you? Kiana summarized. Classic rich guy panic response. Exactly, Mary agreed, like I'd triggered some pre-programmed defense protocol. His loss, Kiana declared with finality. Now, what do you need? Practically speaking, this directness represented exactly why Mary had turned to Kiana first. Her friend understood that emotional support mattered most when paired with tangible assistance. That afternoon, Kiana accompanied Mary to her apartment, surveying the small space with an organizer's eye. We need to maximize every inch, she announced, immediately sketching layout. Options that would accommodate twin bassinets beside Mary's futon. The following weekend, Kiana arrived with her boyfriend Marcus in a rented truck. They transported a donated crib from Kiana's cousin, assembled a changing table found on a neighborhood, free cycle group, and rearranged furniture to create a nursery corner in Mary's studio apartment. My cousin Sophia is having a clean-out, Kiana reported one evening, arriving with bags of gently used baby clothes. She says twins run in families, so she kept everything neutral that could work for either sex. Beyond practical help, Kiana provided emotional ballast through mood swings and uncertainties. She attended Mary's 16-week appointment, gasping appropriately when the ultrasound revealed clearer images of the twins. "They have actual faces now," she marveled, squeezing Mary's hand as they watched tiny profiles on the monitor. When Mary received a larger commission that required studio space she no longer had room for, Kiana offered her own apartment's spare bedroom. "Just clean brushes thoroughly," she stipulated. "I'm all for supporting the arts, but not via permanently stained carpets." Most importantly, Kiana never questioned Mary's decision to continue the pregnancy alone or suggested reaching out to David again. She simply established herself as steadfast support, adjusting her own life to accommodate her friend's changing needs. "You're doing this," she reminded Mary during moments of doubt, "and you're not doing it alone." Mary successfully avoided business news and social media mentions of David Hamilton until mid-March, when a magazine cover at her doctor's waiting room caught her attention. Chicago Business Monthly featured David alongside an elegantly dressed black woman identified as Imani Brooks, PR director for Lux Global Industries. The headline read, "Power Partnership, Hamilton and Brooks collaborate on riverfront development." Mary's heart performed an unexpected painful contraction entirely separate from the twins' movements. The professional photograph showed David in his element, confident, commanding, completely unaffected by the personal earthquake that had altered her entire existence. Imani Brooks possessed the polished perfection of someone who belonged in David's world: designer clothing, strategic smile, practiced pose suggesting both professional competence and personal connection. Despite her better judgment, Mary retrieved the magazine while waiting for her appointment. The article detailed a major development project combining Hamilton Group's architectural expertise with Lux Global's luxury retail connections. Multiple photos showed David and Imani at planning meetings and society events, their body language suggesting comfortable familiarity. One particular image captured them arriving at a charity gala, not unlike the one where Mary had met David. Imani wore a spectacular emerald gown that complemented her flawless complexion. David's hand rested at the small of her back with casual possession. Their matched appearance communicated belonging to each other, to their social stratum, to a world Mary had briefly visited but never joined. "Miss Adams?" The nurse's voice startled Mary from her absorption. "Dr. Patel is ready for you." Mary replaced the magazine with shaking hands, following the nurse while trying to process her unexpected emotional response. She had no claim on David Hamilton. Their connection had ended definitively in his office 2 months earlier. Yet seeing him continuing his life unchanged, perhaps even romantically involved, with someone appropriate to his position, landed like a physical blow. That evening, Mary broke her self-imposed ban on internet searches. Finding numerous photographs of David and Imani at recent events, business publications speculated about their relationship status, noting their compatible professional backgrounds and complementary public personas. One society columnist referred to them as Chicago's newest power couple, seamlessly blending business acumen with social grace. Mary closed her laptop, pressing her palms against her eyes. The twins chose that moment to make their presence known, a fluttering sensation, like butterfly wings that Dr. Patel had confirmed as early movement. The coincidence struck Mary as pointed cosmic commentary. "You're right," she whispered, hands moving to her rounded abdomen. "He's made his choice. We've made ours." In the days that followed, Mary worked through complicated emotions, not jealousy exactly, but mourning for possibilities never realized. She hadn't loved David Hamilton, had barely known him beyond one meaningful night. Yet he remained permanently connected to her through the twins, while he moved forward completely detached from this reality. By month's end, Mary had processed this information and integrated it into her forward momentum. David inhabited his world with appropriate companions. She would create her own world centered on her children and art. Their paths had diverged permanently, and acceptance of this fact brought unexpected peace. As Mary's second trimester progressed, her body's changes became impossible to disguise. Her pregnancy announcement at both jobs met with supportive responses. Rick at the coffee shop adjusted her schedule to accommodate doctor appointments, while the community center director offered continued employment after delivery. "We can arrange classes around your availability," Director Wilkins assured her. "Good art teachers are hard to find, especially ones who connect with the kids like you do." Mary transformed her small apartment with determined efficiency, creating a nursery area with second-hand furniture. Kiana helped apply removable wallpaper with a gentle woodland scene above the crib. A changing table converted from an old dresser provided storage for tiny clothes and supplies. Mary installed floating shelves to maximize vertical space, arranging baby essentials with an artist's eye for accessibility and aesthetics. Financial planning consumed her evenings, spreadsheets tracking income and expenses, research into state assistance, programs for single mothers, calculations of how long her savings might sustain them after birth. Mary increased her painting output, accepting commissions she might previously have declined. A small gallery in Wicker Park agreed to display her newer works, providing potential income that might help during her maternity leave. Twins mean higher costs, but also economies of scale, Mary explained to Kiana during a budgeting session. One crib to start since they can share. One changing table. Clothes they'll outgrow quickly, so minimal quantities. Physical preparation extended beyond material acquisitions. Mary joined a prenatal yoga class specifically for twin pregnancies, learning modifications for her changing center of gravity. She found an online forum for single mothers expecting multiples, absorbing their advice about efficient feeding schedules and sleep strategies. The Chicago Public Library became her second home as Mary absorbed information about twin development, bonding techniques, and practical childcare approaches. She checked out books with titles like You Can Do This, Single Motherhood by Choice and Double Blessing, Raising Healthy Twins. Knowledge is power, she reminded herself, highlighting passages about synchronized feeding and solo parent sleep strategies. Mary also began building community connections that might provide support after delivery. She introduced herself to other pregnant women at her doctor's office, exchanged contact information with twin parents from online groups, and researched neighborhood playgroups that welcomed infants. My mother managed alone after my father died, she told her reflection during evening prenatal stretches. I can manage too. Each preparation step reinforced Mary's confidence. Though the future remained uncertain, she approached it with increasing readiness, transforming fear into focused action. The twins would arrive to find a mother fully committed to their well-being, regardless of their father's absence. The question of names arose during Mary's 20-week anatomy scan, when Dr. Patel confirmed healthy development and verified the twin sexes. One boy and one girl, the doctor announced, pointing to clear evidence on the monitor. Both developing perfectly. Would you like to know more detailed measurements? Mary nodded, absorbing technical information while watching her children's profiles on the screen. The reality of two distinct individuals, not abstract twins, but a son and daughter with unique features already visible, struck her with renewed force. That evening, Mary sat cross-legged on her futon, notebook open before her. Naming these children felt like her first significant act of motherhood, a declaration of their identities and her hopes for their futures. The responsibility weighed heavily. She began listing possibilities, considering family names, meanings, sounds, and practical concerns like potential nicknames or unfortunate initials. Pages filled with combinations, none feeling exactly right until memory surfaced a particular name. Isaiah. Mary's brother Isaiah had died at 19, a car accident on an icy road during her first year of college. His gentle spirit and unwavering support had shaped her early years. He had been the first to recognize her artistic talent, saving lawn mowing, money to buy her proper watercolor supplies when she was 12. You see things differently, he told her. That's a gift. Writing his name in her notebook felt like connecting generations, her brother's legacy extending to her son. Isaiah Adams Hamilton. The name carried dignity and strength, honoring a man who had shown Mary unconditional love during formative years. The girl's name proved more challenging. Mary considered family options, her mother's name Grace, her grandmother's name Elizabeth, but nothing resonated with the same certainty as Isaiah had. Inspiration came during a sleepless night when pregnancy discomfort kept Mary awake. She stood at her window, watching moonlight illuminate Chicago's urban landscape. The full moon hung low and luminous, casting silver light across rooftops and fire escapes. Its steady presence felt like a witness to her solitary journey. Luna, she whispered experimentally. The moon had been her consistent companion during late nights painting, during early mornings heading to work, during countless moments of doubt and determination. It had watched over her through every difficult night, offering silent companionship when human support was absent. Luna Adams Hamilton. The name felt right, distinctive yet accessible, carrying beauty and resilience in its simple syllables. Mary placed both hands on her rounded abdomen, feeling the twins shift beneath her palms. Isaiah and Luna, she said aloud, testing the combination. Isaiah and Luna Hamilton. The names belong together, balanced yet individual, connected to meaningful, aspects of Mary's life without burdening the children with excessive history. They would carry these names forward into futures Mary could scarcely imagine, creating their own associations and meanings. She kept the names private, a secret shared only with the twins themselves during her nightly conversations with them. When Kiana or coworkers asked about potential names, Mary simply smiled and said she was still considering options. These names represented her first gift to her children, identities chosen with care rather than convenience. Isaiah and Luna would arrive with names that honored the past while facing toward unlimited future possibilities. April brought tentative warmth to Chicago, trees budding along Michigan Avenue, as Mary entered her 24th week of pregnancy. Her body had transformed dramatically, the twins making their presence unmistakable through her expanded midsection and the frequent movements that punctuated her days and nights. She had adapted to her changing center of gravity, developed strategies for managing work despite increasing physical limitations, and settled into a routine that balanced necessity with self-care. The morning mail typically held little interest: bills, advertisements, occasional art supply catalogs. Mary sorted through envelopes at her small kitchen counter, separating urgent matters from junk. Among the standard items, a cream-colored envelope stood out, heavy stationery, bearing her name and address in precise handwriting rather than printed labels. No return address appeared on the envelope, but the quality of the paper suggested its origin before Mary even opened it. Her fingers hesitated briefly before breaking the seal. Inside, a single sheet of matching stationery held a message in the same meticulous handwriting. Miss Adams, I would like to request permission to attend your next prenatal appointment. My assistant has confirmed with Dr. Patel's office that you are scheduled for Thursday, April 12th at 2 p.m. Please inform me if my presence would be acceptable to you. I can be reached directly at the private number below. Regards, David Hamilton. A business card was enclosed, minimalist design, embossed with a Hamilton Group logo, but featuring a handwritten cell phone number rather than the printed contact information. Mary read the note 3 times, searching for subtext or legal maneuvering in its carefully neutral language. The formal tone contrasted sharply with the intimacy they had once shared, yet something about the handwritten nature of the request suggested personal involvement rather than assistant-delegated correspondence. She sat heavily on her futon, the letter still in hand. For nearly 3 months, she had heard nothing from David Hamilton. No follow-up after their confrontation in his office. No legal documents from attorneys. No financial offers or paternity questions. Complete silence that had simultaneously relieved and disappointed her. Mary had interpreted his non-response as final rejection, confirmation that he wanted no involvement with his biological children. She had adjusted her expectations and plans accordingly, mentally closing that chapter while focusing on independent preparation for the twins' arrival. This unexpected communication disrupted her carefully constructed narrative. Why now? What had changed? The request itself revealed nothing about his motivations or intentions. The formal language offered no emotional context to help her evaluate his sincerity. Mary placed protective hands over her rounded abdomen, feeling the twins' movements beneath her palms. One kicked emphatically, as if offering an opinion on the matter. What do you think? She asked softly. Should we let him in? No clarity emerged from her one-sided conversation. Mary placed the letter on her small dining table and tried to continue her morning routine. But her thoughts kept returning to the unexpected request and the decision it required. Throughout her shift at the coffee shop, Mary considered possible motivations behind David's letter. Perhaps his attorneys had advised this step before legal proceedings. Maybe public relations concerns had prompted reconsideration of his position. Or possibly, though she hesitated to entertain this hope, something more human had emerged beneath his corporate exterior. Whatever his reasons, Mary now faced her own choice, whether to permit his entry into a medical appointment that represented both vulnerability and connection to the twins. A choice that might influence not just one afternoon but potentially the entire future relationship between her children and their biological father. Mary carried the letter with her for 2 days, its presence in her bag a constant reminder of the decision awaiting her response. During quiet moments between customers or while riding the L train, between jobs, she mentally listed reasons to refuse David's request. His initial rejection had been cold, reducing their children to inconvenient accidents and her integrity to something requiring verification. His silence afterward demonstrated minimal interest in the pregnancy's progression. His corporate approach to human connection suggested fundamental incompatibility with the emotional openness children required. Yet counter-arguments emerged with equal persistence. Whatever his flaws, David Hamilton remained these children's biological father. His genetic material had combined with hers to create the unique individuals growing within her. They would inherit physical traits, predispositions, and biological connections from both parents. More importantly, the twins deserved the opportunity to know their father if he expressed willingness to be known. Mary had no right to permanently close that door based on her own disappointment with his initial reaction. People could change, could grow when confronted with life's transformative moments. Her own journey through unexpected pregnancy had altered her priorities and perspectives. On the second evening, Mary found herself at her kitchen table with Kiana, the letter between them as they shared takeout Chinese food. "What do you think he wants?" Kiana asked, eyeing the expensive stationery with suspicion. "I don't know," Mary admitted, "but I keep thinking about the twins, about their right to have a father if he's willing to step into that role. After how he treated you, are you sure they're mine garbage?" Kiana's protective instincts flared visibly. "He doesn't deserve access." "It's not about what he deserves," Mary replied slowly, articulating the conclusion forming in her mind. "It's about what they deserve, about keeping possibilities open rather than closing them permanently." Kiana studied her friend's expression. "You've already decided, haven't you?" Mary nodded. "I think so. One appointment doesn't commit me to anything long-term, but it leaves the door open a crack, for them, not for him." That night, Mary composed a brief text message to the number David had provided. "You may attend the appointment on Thursday, 2 p.m., Chicago Women's Health Center, Dr. Patel's office. This is for the baby's sake, not yours." She pressed send before doubt could intervene, then placed her phone face down on her nightstand. Whatever David's response, she had made her decision based on her children's potential future rather than past disappointments. The following morning, a simple reply awaited. "Thank you. I'll be there." No elaboration, no emotional language, but a commitment nonetheless. Mary felt simultaneous apprehension and relief. She had opened a possibility without expectations, maintaining boundaries while acknowledging her children's separate interests. As Thursday approached, Mary prepared herself mentally for seeing David again. She selected clothing that made her feel confident, a simple navy maternity dress. That accommodated her expanded midsection while maintaining her dignity. She reviewed her recent test results and questions for Dr. Patel, ensuring the appointment would fulfill its medical purpose regardless of emotional complications. The morning of the appointment, Mary whispered to the twins during her prenatal vitamin routine. "We're seeing your father today," she told them. "I don't know what will happen, but I'm doing this for you. Remember that, always." One of the twins, Luna, Mary suspected from the location, responded with a decisive kick. Mary chose to interpret this as approval, smiling despite her nervousness about the afternoon ahead. Chicago Women's Health Center occupied the third floor of a modern medical building in Lincoln Park. The waiting room featured comfortable seating, current magazines, and a water dispenser with cucumber slices floating in the clear tank. Mary arrived 15 minutes early, signing in at the reception desk. Before selecting a seat near the windows overlooking a small park, she tried to focus on the magazine in her lap, but her attention continually drifted to the elevator doors. Would David actually appear? Would he maintain his corporate demeanor in this intimate setting? How would she manage her own emotions while prioritizing the appointment's medical purpose? At precisely 1:55 p.m., the elevator doors opened to reveal David Hamilton. He wore a charcoal suit without tie, his formal business attire slightly relaxed yet still distinctly out of place among the casual clothing of other waiting patients. He carried nothing, no briefcase, no phone in hand, his attention fully present as he scanned the room and located Mary. Their eyes met across the waiting area. Mary nodded once in acknowledgement, but didn't rise, requiring him to approach her location. A small assertion of autonomy in a situation where she felt unexpectedly vulnerable. David crossed the room with measured steps, stopping a respectful distance from her chair. "Thank you for allowing me to come," he said, voice lowered for privacy. Mary gestured to the adjacent chair. "You can sit. Dr. Patel usually runs on time." He settled beside her, maintaining careful space between them. Up close, Mary noticed subtle changes since their last encounter, slight shadows beneath his eyes suggesting disrupted sleep, a certain tension around his mouth indicating stress not present before. "How are you feeling?" he asked after a moment of awkward silence. "Physically or emotionally?" Mary countered, the question emerging more pointed than she'd intended. "Both, I suppose," David replied, surprising her with his direct response. "I should have asked both Before Mary could formulate a reply, a nurse appeared at the doorway. "Mary Adams, Dr. Patel is ready for you." They followed the nurse to an examination room, equipped with an ultrasound machine and monitor. Mary's vitals were recorded, basic health questions asked and answered, all while David stood quietly. Near the door, his presence acknowledged but not integrated into the routine procedures. When Dr. Patel entered, Mary made a simple introduction. "This is David Hamilton, the twins' father. He's here for today's appointment." The doctor nodded professionally, offering a hand to David before turning her attention back to Mary. "Today we'll do another ultrasound to check growth and development. The twins should be quite active at 24 weeks. Mary settled onto the examination table, adjusting her clothing as Dr. Patel prepared the ultrasound equipment. David remained standing, his posture rigid, expression guarded but attentive. "Would you like to sit closer?" "Doctor," Patel asked him directly. "You'll see better from here." She indicated a stool near the head of the examination table. David hesitated briefly before accepting the offered position, now seated within arm's reach of Mary. The proximity created tangible tension, the first time they had been this close since the night that had created these children. As Dr. Patel applied the cool gel to Mary's rounded abdomen, she explained the procedure. "We'll look at each baby individually, checking organs, limbs, and growth measurements. The heartbeats should be strong and clear." The ultrasound wand moved across Mary's skin, the screen initially showing indistinct gray shapes until Dr. Patel adjusted settings and positioned the probe more precisely. Suddenly, a clear profile appeared, a tiny face with distinguishable nose, lips, and forehead. "Baby A," Dr. Patel announced. "Let's check the heart first." She adjusted a dial, and the room filled with rapid pulsing sounds, a strong, fast heartbeat that made the abstract image on the screen undeniably real. Mary watched David's face as the sound penetrated the room, noting how his carefully maintained expression faltered momentarily, eyes widening at this audible evidence of life. "That's," he began, then stopped, seemingly unable to complete the thought. "That's your baby's heartbeat," Dr. Patel confirmed matter-of-factly. "Strong and regular at 148 beats per minute, which is perfect." David's gaze remained fixed on the monitor as Dr. Patel continued her examination, pointing out baby A's spine, limbs, organs, all developing normally according to her practiced assessment. Mary divided her attention between the screen and David's reactions, witnessing something shift beneath his composed exterior. When Dr. Patel moved the wand to locate baby B, the screen momentarily showed both twins in relation to each other. Two distinct beings sharing limited space, one slightly repositioning as the probe pressed against Mary's abdomen. "They're moving," David said softly, the observation escaping almost involuntarily. "Constantly," Mary replied, "especially at night when I'm trying to sleep." This small shared moment, their first acknowledgement of common connection to these developing lives, hung briefly in the air between them, before Dr. Patel focused on baby B's heartbeat, filling the room with a second distinct rhythm slightly faster than the first. Dr. Patel completed thorough examinations of both twins, measuring limbs, checking organ development, and assessing growth patterns. She maintained a running commentary of medical observations occasionally, asking Mary questions about movement patterns or physical symptoms. Throughout the process, David remained silent but fully engaged, his attention never wavering from the monitor or Dr. Patel's explanations. Based on all measurements and development markers, both twins are progressing exactly as expected. For 24 weeks, Dr. Patel concluded, wiping the gel from Mary's abdomen. Baby A is slightly larger, which is common in twin pregnancies, but both are within normal parameters. She adjusted the monitor so both Mary and David could see the screen clearly. "Would you like me to confirm the sexes again? We identified them at your 20-week scan, but sometimes parents appreciate the reassurance." Mary glanced at David, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Yes, please," she answered. Dr. Patel moved the ultrasound wand with practiced precision, locating and highlighting specific anatomical features. "Baby A is definitely a boy," she confirmed, pointing to clear evidence on the screen. "And baby B is definitely a girl. One of each, one boy and one girl. Both healthy," David repeated quietly, as if committing the information to memory. "Yes, both developing perfectly," Dr. Patel confirmed with a smile. "The placentas look healthy, amniotic fluid levels are normal, and their positions currently look good. Of course, they'll move around quite a bit before delivery." She printed several images from the ultrasound, handing them to Mary. "These are for you," different angles of each baby. I've labeled them A and B so you can keep track of who's who. Mary accepted the photos, automatically offering one set to David. The moment their fingers connected in the exchange created unexpected tension, the physical contact, however minimal, reminding them of intimacy now replaced by formality. Dr. Patel continued with standard prenatal guidance, discussing Mary's increasing physical symptoms and recommending adjustments to her activities as the pregnancy progressed. With twins, we typically see more pressure on the cervix earlier than with singleton pregnancies. You'll need to reduce standing time at work and elevate your feet whenever possible. David listened with focused attention, his expression suggesting he was mentally cataloging each recommendation and concern. When Dr. Patel mentioned potential signs of preterm labor that would require immediate medical attention, he leaned forward slightly, his body language communicating heightened alertness. "How frequently will appointments be scheduled from this point?" he asked, his first direct question during the session. "Every 2 weeks until 32 weeks, then weekly until delivery," Dr. Patel explained. "Twin pregnancies require closer monitoring, especially in the 3rd trimester." David nodded, glancing briefly at Mary before returning his attention to the doctor. "And the delivery timing? What's typical for twins?" "Full term for twins is considered 37 weeks, though many deliver earlier," Dr. Patel explained. "We'll be watching carefully for signs of preterm labor. Around 50% of twins arrive before 37 weeks, but with proper monitoring and care, we optimize outcomes even with earlier arrivals." As the appointment concluded, Dr. Patel addressed them both with final recommendations and scheduled Mary's next visit in 2 weeks. "Do you have any other questions today?" she asked. Mary shook her head, but David spoke up unexpectedly. What can be done to reduce her workload? She mentioned working 2 jobs. The question, the first acknowledgement that he had absorbed personal details about Mary's situation, caught her by surprise. Dr. Patel turned to Mary with professional concern. "Reduced hours would definitely be beneficial, especially limiting time on your feet. Can you arrange modified duties at either position?" Before Mary could respond, David interjected, "Financial considerations shouldn't prevent appropriate medical recommendations. That can be addressed separately." The statement hung in the air. Not quite an offer, not quite a demand, but definitely an assertion of potential involvement beyond this single appointment. After leaving Dr. Patel's office, Mary and David stood awkwardly in the building's lobby. The ultrasound photos remained clutched in David's hand, his gaze repeatedly dropping to study the grainy images of profiles and tiny limbs. "Thank you again for allowing me to attend," he said formally, though something in his voice had softened since their arrival. Mary nodded, unsure how to proceed. The appointment had clearly affected David, but she remained cautious about attributing too much significance to what might be temporary emotion rather than fundamental change. "Would you have time for coffee?" David asked suddenly, the request seeming to surprise him as much as her. "There's a cafe across the street. I'd like to talk, if you're willing." Mary considered declining, protecting herself from potential disappointment. Yet something in his expression, a vulnerability absent during their previous encounter, prompted her to nod agreement. "I can spare 30 minutes. The cafe offered quiet corner tables away from the afternoon crowd. David ordered herbal tea for Mary without asking, remembering her mentioned aversion to coffee smells during pregnancy, a small detail that suggested he had actually listened during the appointment rather than merely observed. Once seated, David placed the ultrasound photos carefully on the table between them, his fingers lingering on the edges as if maintaining connection to what they represented. "I've handled this poorly from the beginning," he said without preamble, his direct approach unexpected after months of silence. "My reaction was inexcusable." Mary remained silent, allowing him space to continue without prompting or absolution. "When you first told me about the pregnancy, I reverted to defensive patterns," David continued, meeting her eyes directly. "I treated a human situation as a business problem to be managed. I reduced you to a potential liability rather than seeing the person I had connected with that night." He paused, seemingly searching for appropriate words. Hearing their heartbeats today, seeing them move, it made everything real in a way I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge before. Mary studied his expression, noting genuine distress beneath his usual composure. "They've been real to me from the beginning," she said quietly. "I've felt them grow, felt them move. They're already people to me, not abstract concepts." David nodded, accepting the implicit criticism without defense. "I understand that now, or I'm beginning to." He glanced down at the ultrasound images. When the doctor said, "one boy and one girl," something shifted. They became individuals with futures I could actually envision. This admission, this glimpse of emotional rather than strategic thinking, represented the first crack in David's carefully maintained facade. Mary remained cautious but attentive as he continued. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he clarified, "and I'm not making promises I'm unsure I can fulfill. But I would like permission to attend future appointments, to learn more about what they need and what you need during this pregnancy." The request contained no legal language, no corporate phrasing about arrangements or agreements. It represented a simple human ask, tentative and uncertain, but genuine in its directness. "Why now?" Mary questioned. "It's been nearly 3 months since I told you." David's gaze dropped momentarily before meeting hers again with unexpected honesty. "Fear," he admitted, "not of responsibility or financial obligation, but of emotional involvement, of caring about something I couldn't control or protect through conventional means." The admission revealed more about David Hamilton than their night together had. A glimpse of the vulnerability beneath his successful exterior, the humanity behind the corporate mask. His carefully constructed life had protected him from emotional risk, from the messiness of human connection that couldn't be managed through contracts or strategic planning. "I can't promise I'll suddenly become a different person," he continued, "but I can promise to try, to listen, to learn, to consider perspectives beyond my own. These children deserve that much effort, whatever the outcome." Mary considered his words carefully, measuring them against her protective instincts and her children's future interests. "I'll allow you to attend appointments," she finally decided. "The rest depends on consistency and genuine effort. These babies don't need intermittent interest or corporate solutions. They need authentic presence, even if imperfect." David nodded, accepting her terms without negotiation. "Thank you. I understand." As they prepared to leave, David carefully returned the ultrasound photos to Mary, his fingers lingering briefly on the images. "Do they have names?" he asked unexpectedly. The question, personal rather than practical, suggested interest beyond medical facts or legal considerations. Mary hesitated before answering, these names having been her private connection to the twins for months. "Isaiah and Luna," she finally shared. "Isaiah for my brother who passed away. Luna because the moon has watched over me through every hard night." David repeated the names softly, testing their sound. "Isaiah and Luna," he said, a hint of emotion coloring his voice. "They're beautiful names." In this small moment of shared connection, names giving identity to the lives they had created together, something tentative and fragile began taking root. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but possibility. A door left open, rather than permanently closed. A week after the ultrasound appointment, David called Mary with an unexpected invitation. "I'd like to have dinner with you," he said, his voice lacking its usual authoritative edge. "There are things I need to say that deserve more than a hurried conversation." Mary hesitated, protective instincts warring with practical considerations. "I'm not sure that's necessary." "It is to me," David replied simply. "Please. 2 hours of your time, a public place of your choosing." After consideration, Mary agreed, selecting a small Italian restaurant in Lincoln Park, comfortable, without being intimate, quiet enough for conversation but public enough for security. "Thursday at 7, she confirmed. "I have Fridays off from the coffee shop." When Thursday evening arrived, Mary dressed carefully in a burgundy maternity dress. That accommodated her 25-week belly while maintaining her dignity. She arrived precisely on time to find David already seated at a corner table, rising as she approached. "Thank you for coming," he said, helping her with her chair before returning to his seat. The restaurant offered warm lighting and discreet service, tables spaced far enough apart to ensure privacy without isolation. Classical music played softly in the background, creating atmosphere without intruding on conversation. Their server took drink orders, sparkling water for both, and left menus before withdrawing tactfully. An awkward silence settled between them, the weight of unresolved tensions and unanswered questions creating invisible barriers. "You look well," David finally offered, his eyes briefly taking in her changed appearance. "Appearances can be deceptive," Mary replied. "The twins seemed determined to use my rib cage for gymnastics practice." This small moment of honesty about her pregnancy created a tentative opening. David leaned forward slightly, his expression showing genuine interest. "Is that uncomfortable?" "Sometimes painful," Mary admitted, "especially at night. They become most active when I'm trying to rest. Already asserting their independence, David observed with unexpected humor. The comment surprised a genuine smile from Mary. Definitely their father's children in that respect. This acknowledgement of their biological connection shifted the atmosphere subtly. They ordered, Mary selecting pasta that wouldn't aggravate her recent heartburn. David choosing a similar dish, perhaps in unconscious solidarity. As they waited for their food, conversation remained cautious but increasingly natural. Mary described recent prenatal yoga classes specifically designed for twin pregnancies. David asked thoughtful questions about her work schedule and physical accommodations. They discussed Dr. Patel's recommendations and upcoming appointment timing. When their meals arrived, David set his napkin in his lap and looked directly at Mary. I didn't invite you to dinner for casual conversation, though I've enjoyed it more than I expected, he admitted. I asked you here because I owe you an apology, a real one, not a strategic statement designed to manage the situation. Mary set down her fork, recognizing the pivotal moment that had arrived. I'm listening. David's composed expression faltered momentarily as he searched for an appropriate beginning. I need to explain something about myself, he finally said, not as justification for my behavior, but as context that might help you understand my limitations. He took a careful sip of water before continuing. I grew up with deals, not love, he stated, the words emerging with practiced neutralness that suggested they masked deeper emotion. My father built Hamilton Group from nothing, his entire identity centered on its success. My mother maintained our social position with military precision. Their marriage was essentially a business arrangement that produced two acceptable heirs. Mary listened without interruption, noting the careful control in David's voice as he continued. Achievements earned conditional approval. Failures received swift correction. Emotional displays were considered weaknesses to be eliminated. By age 10, I understood that negotiations superseded feelings in all situations. He described a childhood of private schools selected for networking, opportunities rather than educational philosophy, summer programs, chosen for resume value rather than personal interest, and family vacations that doubled as business development opportunities. My brother Marcus rebelled, dropped out of Wharton, traveled through Southeast Asia, eventually settled in New Zealand running an ecotourism company. He's happier than I've ever been, David admitted with surprising candor. I followed the prescribed path, Harvard Business, McKinsey Consulting, returning to take my position at Hamilton Group when my father's health declined. Mary noted the absence of typical childhood memories, no mention of birthday, celebrations, family traditions, or moments of parental affection. Even allowing for selective storytelling, the omissions revealed volumes. When I met you at the gallery, David continued, his voice softening, you represented something entirely outside my experience. Authentic passion for creation rather than acquisition, work valued for meaning rather than market position, your honesty about your art. I found it extraordinary. He paused, his expression vulnerable in ways Mary hadn't witnessed before. That night with you wasn't planned or strategic. It was the first genuinely spontaneous connection I'd experienced in years. And then you disappeared, Mary observed quietly. David nodded, acknowledging the impact of her morning departure. Your note made perfect sense, rational assessment of incompatible lifestyles. I respected your clarity while simultaneously feeling disappointed, but I returned to familiar patterns, to the world I understood. His voice lowered further. When you came to my office with news of the pregnancy, I reverted to deeply ingrained responses, assess threat level, establish defensive position, negotiate favorable terms. I treated a human situation as a business problem because that's the only approach I've mastered. David met Mary's eyes directly. I'm not sharing this to excuse my behavior, but to explain why I responded so poorly. To news that should have prompted human connection rather than strategic withdrawal. The admission carried no self-pity, only straightforward recognition of personal limitation, a beginning of self-awareness rather than a completed journey. Mary found herself moved, despite her protective barriers, recognizing the courage required for this level of honesty. Thank you for telling me this, she said simply. It helps me understand. Mary had prepared for this conversation during sleepless nights, considering what her children would need from their father if he chose involvement. She had weighed idealism against practicality, her own hurt feelings against the twins' future interests. The clarity of her position had solidified gradually, shaped by protective instinct and thoughtful consideration. Understanding your background matters, she acknowledged, But moving forward requires more than explanation. It requires consistent action and fundamental change. David nodded, accepting this assessment without defense. I agree. If you want involvement with Isaiah and Luna, Mary continued deliberately, using their names to emphasize their individuality, I need certain guarantees, not legal documents, but human commitments demonstrated through consistent behavior. She straightened in her chair, one hand resting protectively on her rounded abdomen, where the twins shifted beneath her palm. I won't subject them to inconsistent presence or conditional interest. They deserve better than emotional uncertainty or attention based on convenience. What exactly are you asking? David inquired, his tone suggesting openness rather than negotiation. I'm establishing necessary conditions, Mary clarified. Requirements that protect the twins from patterns that would harm their emotional development. They're non-negotiable because they're based on their needs, not my preferences. David seemed to recognize the significance of this distinction, nodding for her to continue. First, honesty and transparency in all matters regarding the twins. No strategic communication, no managed narratives. Second, consistent presence. Not necessarily daily, but reliable and predictable involvement they can count on. Third, respect for my role as their mother, including collaborative decision-making rather than unilateral actions. Mary paused, gathering herself for the more personal conditions. Fourth, public acknowledgement of your relationship to them and to me as their mother. No hiding or compartmentalizing to protect your image or business interests. David listened attentively, his expression revealing neither agreement nor resistance, simply focused attention on her words. Mary continued with the final, most challenging conditions. I've seen the photos of you with Imani Brooks, Mary stated directly. Your professional collaboration appears to include strategic social appearances that suggest romantic involvement. Those implied relationships need to end immediately. David's eyebrows rose slightly at the specificity of this condition. I'm not dictating your personal life, Mary clarified. You're free to date whoever you choose, but manufactured public narratives that conflict with your commitment to these children are unacceptable. End the rumors. No photo games. Tell the truth about your situation, she continued without allowing interruption. Additionally, I require that you begin therapy, both individual counseling to address the patterns you have just described and eventually co-parenting sessions with me to establish healthy communication. The most difficult requirement came last. Finally, we take this slow. No grand gestures, no overnight transformations, no promises you can't sustain. Consistent small steps that build trust over time. These children deserve authentic evolution, not performance. Mary finished her conditions and waited, having laid out terms that asked for fundamental change rather than superficial compliance. The moment stretched between them, the restaurant's ambient sounds fading, as they remained focused entirely on this pivotal conversation. Is there anything else? David asked, his voice careful and measured. Yes, Mary added. Your relationship with Imani Brooks requires immediate clarification. If you have genuine romantic involvement with her, that's your choice. But if your appearances together serve business or image purposes, that arrangement ends now. The twins deserve a father whose personal life aligns with his stated commitments. The directness of this final condition clearly surprised David. You've researched thoroughly, he observed without defensiveness. These are my children, Mary replied simply. I leave nothing to chance where their well-being is concerned. David remained silent for several moments, his expression thoughtful rather than resistant. When he finally spoke, his voice carried unusual emotional weight. I accept all of your conditions, he said without qualification or modification. They're fair, necessary, and ultimately beneficial not just for Isaiah and Luna, but for my own development as a person. The straightforward acceptance surprised Mary, who had prepared for negotiation or partial agreement. David continued before she could respond. Regarding Imani Brooks, our relationship is primarily professional with strategic social appearances as you correctly assessed. I'll end that arrangement immediately and clarify the situation publicly. She'll understand. It's essentially a business decision. He paused, then added with unexpected self-awareness, though the fact that I view it that way rather reinforces your concerns about my approach to relationships. This moment of insight, recognition of his own patterns without prompting, suggested capacity for growth that Mary hadn't been certain existed. David continued with increasing conviction. I've already contacted a therapist specializing in family systems and emotional development. My first appointment is scheduled for next week. I should have done this years ago, regardless of our situation. He hesitated before addressing her final condition. Taking things slowly will be challenging for me," he admitted honestly. "My instinct is to apply resources intensively to solve problems quickly, but I understand why gradual, authentic change matters more than efficient solutions in this context." Mary studied his expression, searching for signs of strategic compliance rather than genuine commitment. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "Actions will matter more than words moving forward," she reminded him. "Consistency over time builds trust, not initial promises." "I understand," David agreed. "I'm not asking for trust I haven't earned. I'm asking for opportunity to demonstrate change through sustained effort." As their dinner concluded, David requested permission to attend Mary's next prenatal appointment. "I'd like to establish a regular presence in the pregnancy process, if you're comfortable with that." Mary considered the request against her established conditions. "Yes," she decided, "but medical appointments are just the beginning. Actual parenting will require much more than scheduled appearances." "I know," David acknowledged. "I have much to learn, and I'm grateful for the chance to begin." They parted with cautious formality. No dramatic promises, no emotional declarations, simply mutual recognition of a pathway forward that prioritized the twins' well-being above personal history or convenience. As Mary watched David's car pull away from the restaurant, she felt neither triumph nor surrender, but something more nuanced, guarded hope that the father of her children might actually become the man they deserved. The journey would require patience and vigilance on her part, genuine transformation on his, but the first step had been taken. For Isaiah and Luna, that possibility alone justified the risk of conditional trust. The following Monday morning, Chicago business circles buzzed with unexpected news. David Hamilton, CEO of Hamilton Group and fixture of the city's elite social scene, had issued a personal statement to major media outlets. "I'm expecting twins with artist Mary Adams. We look forward to welcoming our children later this year. I ask for privacy and respect for Miss Adams. During this significant time, all previous implications regarding my relationship status with other individuals were inaccurate and are hereby clarified." The statement, direct, unambiguous, and lacking corporate language, appeared on Hamilton Group's official channels and David's personal social media accounts simultaneously. No strategic ambiguity, no carefully crafted implications. Just straightforward acknowledgement of facts previously kept private. Business publications quickly picked up the story, seeking additional details and context. David declined all interview requests with a simple follow-up: "This is a private family matter. My priority is supporting Ms. Adams and preparing for our children's arrival." When a particularly persistent reporter from Chicago Business Monthly referenced his previous appearances with Imani Brooks, David's response was equally direct. "Ms. Brooks is a valued business associate. Any suggestion of romantic involvement was incorrect and misrepresented our professional relationship. I apologize to her for any discomfort this clarification may cause." Mary learned about the public statement when Kiana called her, excitement evident in her voice. "Have you seen it? He actually did it. It's everywhere, even trending locally on Twitter." Mary checked her phone to find the statement forwarded by multiple friends, along with supportive messages and surprised congratulations. The public acknowledgement, without her prompting or reminder, represented David's first concrete action since accepting her terms. That evening, he texted her a simple message. First step taken. No hidden agendas, no strategic ambiguity. Just truth. The statement triggered predictable responses across Chicago's social landscape. Business associates sent formal congratulations. Society friends expressed surprise through carefully worded messages. Tabloids speculated about the relationship's timeline and nature. Through it all, David maintained his clear position. He was expecting twins with Mary Adams, period. No elaborate explanations, no damage control narratives. The simplicity of his approach suggested genuine commitment to transparency rather than managed public relations. 3 days later, Imani Brooks released her own statement confirming their purely professional relationship and expressing support for David's growing family. The coordinated messaging effectively ended speculation about their connection, closing that chapter cleanly. For Mary, the public acknowledgement brought mixed emotions: relief that David had honored this important condition, anxiety about increased attention, and cautious hope that his actions might actually align with his promises moving forward. When they met for coffee later that week, she acknowledged his follow-through. "Thank you for doing that," she said simply. "It couldn't have been easy given your usual privacy." Actually, it was surprisingly liberating, David admitted. No more calculated appearances or implied narratives, just straightforward reality. This unexpected perspective, finding freedom in honesty rather than viewing it as a concession, suggested potential for genuine change rather than mere compliance with her conditions. Words initiated David's commitment, but consistent actions gradually demonstrated its authenticity. Over the following weeks, his behavior revealed a man genuinely attempting transformation rather than performing expected roles. The first tangible evidence arrived unexpectedly at Mary's apartment, a delivery requiring 2 men to navigate her narrow staircase. Inside the large box, she discovered a custom ergonomic chair designed specifically for pregnant women, accompanied by an adjustable desk that could accommodate her growing belly while allowing her to continue painting comfortably. The note attached read simply, "Dr. Patel mentioned your back pain. This might help. The desk adjusts to standing position when sitting becomes uncomfortable." Unlike showy jewelry or expensive clothes, gifts that would have suggested superficial understanding, this practical item addressed her actual needs and supported her work. Mary appreciated both the thoughtfulness and the absence of grand gestures demanding gratitude. David's attentiveness extended to medical matters without overstepping boundaries. He researched twin pregnancy complications thoroughly, arriving at appointments with relevant questions but deferring appropriately to Mary's decisions. He created a shared digital calendar marking important medical dates, prenatal class schedules, and deadlines for nursery preparation. "I scheduled installation of the car seats for next Tuesday," he mentioned during their 2008-week appointment. "The hospital requires them before discharge, and I found a certified technician who specializes in twin arrangements." Such practical preparations, consistently handled without prompting, gradually established a pattern of reliability that Mary hadn't initially expected. David approached parenthood preparation with the same thoroughness he applied to business projects, yet increasingly tempered this efficiency with emotional awareness. His commitment manifested in less obvious ways as well. Mary noticed subtle changes in his language and priorities, references to our children rather than the twins, schedule adjustments that prioritized pregnancy-related matters over business demands, and increasing comfort discussing emotional rather than merely practical aspects of impending parenthood. When Mary mentioned difficulty sleeping due to the twins' active movements, David appeared the next day with a specialized pregnancy pillow and a selection of soothing sound machines. "The reviews suggested these might help," he explained without fanfare. "If they don't, we'll find alternatives." This ongoing pattern, identifying needs, researching solutions, implementing help without expectation of praise, slowly distinguished David's approach from performance-based assistance. He wasn't accumulating points or creating obligations, he was simply addressing problems as they arose. Perhaps most significantly, David maintained regular therapy sessions without Mary needing to verify his attendance. Occasionally he referenced insights from these appointments, indicating genuine engagement with the process rather than perfunctory compliance. "My therapist pointed out that I confuse efficiency with effectiveness. In relationships," he shared during a nursery planning session, "I'm learning that emotional connections require different metrics than business projects." Such unprompted reflections revealed internal work occurring beyond Mary's observation, the most convincing evidence that his commitment extended beyond their direct interactions into genuine personal development. Dr. Patel's examination room became neutral territory, where Mary and David gradually established patterns of collaboration and mutual support. Bi-weekly appointments created consistent opportunities for shared experience without the pressure of purely social interaction. During the 28-week growth scan, Dr. Patel noted a slight measurement discrepancy between the twins. "Baby B is measuring about a week behind baby A in weight," she explained. "It's common with twins, but we'll monitor this carefully." Mary's hand instinctively moved to her abdomen, concern immediately evident in her expression. Without comment, David shifted his chair closer, offering his hand if she wanted connection. The gesture, supportive without presumption, marked evolving comfort between them. Mary accepted his hand briefly, appreciating the shared concern rather than isolated worry. "Is there anything we should do differently?" she asked Dr. Patel. "Extra protein in your diet might help," the doctor suggested, "and we'll schedule additional growth scans to track progression." David took notes on his phone, asking clarifying questions about optimal protein sources and timing. Later that day, he arranged grocery delivery to Mary's apartment, organic protein, options, preparation instructions included, no fanfare or credit sought. By the 30-week appointment, their coordination had developed noticeable rhythm. David arrived early to secure parking. Mary brought the updated question list and, They naturally divided responsibilities during discussions with Dr. Patel. Their shared focus remained consistently on the twins' well-being rather than their personal relationship dynamics. When a hospital tour was recommended, they attended together, asking complimentary questions about delivery protocols and twin-specific accommodations. The labor and delivery nurse mistook them for a married couple, an assumption neither corrected but both silently noted. "You two seem well prepared," the nurse commented. Many parents of multiples look overwhelmed at this stage. The observation highlighted their functional partnership despite unconventional circumstances. They had established effective co-parenting patterns before their children's birth, an unexpected foundation built through medical necessity rather than romantic progression. Dr. Patel noticed their evolving dynamic during the 32-week appointment when David automatically helped Mary onto the examination table, anticipating her balance difficulties without making her feel incapable. "You're working well together," the doctor observed while measuring Mary's growing belly. "That coordination will be essential with newborn twins." The comment acknowledged their developing partnership without romantic assumptions, recognition of practical connection forming through shared purpose rather than conventional relationship progression. During these medical appointments, Mary observed David's increasing comfort with physical aspects of pregnancy. His initial awkwardness when discussing bodily functions replaced by matter-of-fact acceptance of physiological realities. He no longer flinched at mentions of cervical dilation or mucus plugs, instead focusing on relevant information without embarrassment. This gradual normalization of intimate medical details created unexpected comfort between them, a desexualized familiarity that paradoxically built connection through its very clinical nature. By sharing these medical moments, they established foundations of trust separate from their complex personal history. Physical proximity came first, the natural result of attending appointments together, reviewing nursery plans side by side, navigating Mary's decreasing mobility as her pregnancy advanced. Their bodies remembered previous connection, even as their minds maintained careful boundaries. Emotional intimacy developed more gradually through small, unplanned moments. During a prenatal class focusing on labor techniques, David participated fully as Mary's support person, learning massage methods and breathing patterns without self-consciousness. "You don't need to actually do this during delivery," Mary clarified as he practiced counter-pressure on her lower back. "I've asked Kiana to be my birth partner." "I know," David replied without defensiveness, "but I want to understand the process completely, even if I'm in a different role." This acceptance of defined boundaries while remaining fully engaged exemplified their evolving relationship. Respect for established limits without withdrawal of genuine presence. Trust rebuilt in incremental steps, often through mundane interactions that demonstrated consistent reliability. David never missed appointments, always arrived prepared, and followed through on commitments without reminders. Mary gradually relaxed her vigilance, no longer anticipating disappointment or calculating contingencies for his potential absence. One evening, after a particularly long growth scan appointment, Mary mentioned unusual fatigue and dizziness. Without overreaction, David suggested dinner at a restaurant near her apartment. During the meal, he noticed her increasing discomfort and quietly arranged for his driver to take them directly to the hospital. "Your blood pressure seems elevated," he explained calmly. "Better to check now than worry overnight." The precaution proved warranted. Mary was diagnosed with early signs of preeclampsia requiring overnight observation. David remained in the waiting room until visiting hours ended, returning first thing the next morning with her requested items from home. This incident, his measured response neither minimizing her symptoms nor creating unnecessary alarm, marked significant trust restoration. Mary recognized that David had become someone she could depend on in genuine need, not just scheduled obligations. Their communication patterns evolved similarly, text messages increasing in both frequency and personal content. David began sharing thoughts beyond practical matters, observations about potential personality traits he noticed in ultrasound behaviors, reflections on his own childhood experiences he hoped to improve upon, occasional humor about their unusual situation. Mary reciprocated gradually, sending updates about the twins' movements and her own experiences. "Luna has hiccups again, third time today. Isaiah seems to sleep through them completely." These casual exchanges built conversational comfort previously absent from their interaction. They developed private references and shared observations that created unique connection, independent of their single night together or their medical appointments. Physical boundaries remained clear. No romantic overtures or confusion of co-parenting with relationship reconciliation. Yet emotional intimacy grew naturally through shared experience and mutual vulnerability. David increasingly revealed personal thoughts about impending fatherhood. Mary occasionally shared anxieties about delivery and newborn care. Trust, once fractured by his initial rejection, gradually reconstructed. Through consistent evidence of changed priorities and genuine commitment, Mary's protective skepticism softened incrementally, replaced by cautious confidence in David's reliability, if not yet complete trust in his emotional permanence. As Mary entered her third trimester, their focus shifted from pregnancy management to practical preparation for the twins' arrival. This transition revealed deepening connection as co-parents preparing for shared responsibility rather than individuals navigating separate paths. David purchased a brownstone in Lincoln Park with ground floor access and proximity to Mary's preferred pediatrician. "I'm not suggesting immediate cohabitation," he clarified, "but having appropriate space for the twins when they're with me seems essential. The second floor can be your studio if you ever want dedicated workspace." The property acquisition demonstrated long-term commitment to active parenting while respecting Mary's independence, practical support without presumptuous planning. He arranged nursery preparation in both locations, ensuring identical cribs and equipment for consistency between homes. Their conversations increasingly centered on parenting philosophy rather than just practical arrangements. During a Saturday spent assembling furniture for Mary's apartment nursery, they discussed approaches to early childhood development and educational priorities. "My parents prioritized achievement over emotional well-being," David reflected, carefully attaching crib rails. "I don't want Isaiah and Luna feeling valued only for their accomplishments." Mary nodded, arranging onesies in the newly assembled dresser. "My mother emphasized creativity and self-expression, but sometimes at the expense of practical skills. I hope we can balance both." These exchanges, tentative sharing of values and concerns, represented their deepening connection as partners in the essential project of raising children. They discovered surprising alignment on core principles despite different backgrounds, finding common ground in their desire to improve upon their own childhood experiences. Mary noticed David's increasing comfort discussing emotional aspects of parenting, a significant evolution from his initially practical approach. During a childbirth preparation class, when participants were asked about their fears, he admitted vulnerability without hesitation. "I'm afraid I won't know how to comfort them," he acknowledged quietly. "Emotional nurturing wasn't modeled in my family. I worry that instinct alone won't be enough." This honest self-assessment, recognition of potential limitation without defensiveness, demonstrated genuine growth rather than strategic compliance with Mary's conditions. His willingness to acknowledge parenting concerns rather than projecting false confidence suggested authentic engagement with the emotional dimensions of fatherhood. As Mary's due date approached, they established more formal co-parenting structures, weekly planning, meetings, shared decision-to-making processes, and communication protocols for the postpartum period. These discussions revealed growing mutual respect for their complementary strengths. "You understand emotional needs intuitively," David acknowledged during a pediatrician selection discussion. "I trust your judgment about which doctor will provide the right kind of support." Mary reciprocated this recognition. "Your organizational skills will be essential with twins. I appreciate your planning ability, even when it initially seems excessive." This mutual appreciation, acknowledging value in their different approaches, represented significant evolution from their early interactions. They had progressed from viewing their differences as incompatible to recognizing their complementary nature in parenting partnership. During the 36-week appointment, when Dr. Patel discussed delivery planning and hospital procedures, David and Mary exchanged a look of shared anticipation and nervousness. The moment contained no romantic undertones, yet carried profound connection. Two people united in readiness to meet the children they had created, prepared to face that life-changing experience with mutual support, despite their unconventional path. "We're ready," David stated with quiet confidence, speaking for both of them with Mary's nodded agreement. "Whatever happens, we'll handle it together." The statement encapsulated their journey from strangers to co-parents, a partnership built not on romantic reconciliation but on shared purpose and developing trust. Isaiah and Luna would arrive to find parents committed to their well-being, connected through conscious choice rather than conventional relationship. Their story had become something neither could have anticipated that night at the charity gala, not a fairy tale romance but something, perhaps more meaningful, a deliberate, mindful partnership focused entirely on creating stability and love for their children. At exactly 34 weeks, Mary awakened at 3:17 a.m. to an unfamiliar sensation, a tightening across her abdomen that felt different from the Braxton Hicks contractions she had experienced in previous weeks. She lay still in the darkness of her apartment, hands resting on her rounded belly, waiting to see if the feeling would return. 4 minutes later, another wave arrived, stronger than the first. Mary reached for her phone, opening the contraction timing app Dr. Patel had recommended. She recorded the duration and intensity, trying to remain calm despite the unexpected timing. The twins weren't due for another 3 weeks, and even that date had been considered early. A third contraction confirmed a pattern forming. Mary called David, despite the early hour. Their contingency planning had prepared for this moment. His phone would be on. Regardless of time, his driver available for immediate hospital transport. Mary. His voice came instantly alert despite being pulled from sleep. "Is it time?" "I think so," she replied, maintaining remarkable composure. Contractions about 4 minutes apart. Not extremely painful yet, but definitely real. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, David said without hesitation. "Have you called Dr. Patel?" "Doing that next," Mary confirmed, another contraction beginning as she spoke. "I need to finish packing the hospital bag." "Don't worry about the bag," David instructed. "Just sit down and time the contractions." "I have a duplicate of everything in my car." His preparation, anticipating potential scenarios and having contingencies ready, provided unexpected comfort in this moment of uncertainty. Mary followed his suggestion, lowering herself carefully onto the edge of her bed, focusing on her breathing as she'd practiced in prenatal classes. Exactly 12 minutes later, a gentle knock sounded at her door. David entered using the emergency key she had provided weeks earlier, his expression calm but alert. He had clearly dressed hastily, jeans and a cashmere sweater rather than his usual formal attire, but his demeanor conveyed steady reassurance. "How are you doing?" he asked, immediately kneeling beside her to establish eye contact at her level. "They're getting stronger," Mary admitted as another contraction built. "About 3.5 minutes apart now." David nodded, checking the app on her phone before sending a quick text. "Dr. Patel will meet us at the hospital. My driver is waiting downstairs. Can you walk, or should I carry you?" "I can walk between contractions," Mary assured him, appreciating his matter-of-fact approach. No panic, no excessive concern, just practical assistance focused entirely on her needs. The journey downstairs proceeded slowly, David supporting her weight during each contraction, murmuring quiet encouragement that reflected their childbirth class training. His black SUV waited directly outside, driver holding the door as they approached. "Prentice Women's Hospital," David instructed as he helped Mary into the back seat. "Use the emergency entrance on Superior Street." Chicago's empty pre-dawn streets allowed swift transit, the vehicles gentle. Suspension minimizing discomfort as Mary's contractions intensified. David sat beside her, timing each wave, offering his hand when she reached for support during particularly strong moments. "The twins are coming early," Mary said during a brief respite between contractions. "Will they be okay?" 34 weeks has excellent outcomes for twins, David replied, having researched this specific scenario extensively. "Their lungs are developed, though they might need some support initially. The NICU team will be ready." His calm confidence, built on knowledge rather than empty reassurance, provided genuine comfort. They had discussed potential complications extensively, reviewing medical research, rather than relying on vague optimism. This preparation now anchored them both as unexpected timing accelerated their plans. Upon arrival at the hospital, events moved quickly. Dr. Patel met them in the assessment room, confirming active labor with Mary already dilated to 5 centimeters. "The twins are coming today," she announced after examining Mary. "Baby A is already in position. Everything looks good, but we'll monitor carefully given the early timing." Within 30 minutes, Mary was settled in a delivery suite specifically designed for multiple births. 2 infant warming stations waited in the corner. Additional medical personnel prepared quietly, their presence acknowledging the increased complexity of twin delivery. 34 weeks is technically premature, Dr. Patel explained while reviewing monitor readings. "But it's actually quite common with twins. We have everything ready for their arrival." David stationed himself at Mary's side, surprisingly comfortable in the medical environment despite its intensity. He helped adjust her position when needed, offered ice chips and maintained the steady presence he had cultivated throughout her pregnancy. "Remember our birth preferences," Mary reminded him during a moment of clarity between increasingly powerful contractions. "Delayed cord clamping if possible. Skin-to-skin contact as soon as medically appropriate." "I have the list," David assured her, producing a laminated card from his wallet. "And Dr. Patel has the full version in your chart. I'll advocate for everything possible within medical necessity." This promise, to represent her wishes while respecting medical reality, exemplified their evolved partnership. Neither blind support nor controlling management, but balanced advocacy based on shared priorities and mutual respect. As dawn broke over Lake Michigan, Mary's labor progressed with increasing intensity. The monitors showed both twins maintaining strong heartbeats despite the stress of contractions. Medical staff moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for the imminent arrival of 2 new lives. By 7:30 a.m., Mary's labor had progressed to transition phase, the most intense period before pushing begins. Contractions came relentlessly, barely allowing recovery between powerful waves. Dr. Patel confirmed complete dilation and gave permission to begin pushing when Mary felt the urge. "The twins are doing beautifully," the doctor assured them, monitoring both heartbeats. "Baby A is in perfect position for delivery." The delivery room transformed with additional personnel, a second obstetrician specializing in multiple births, neonatal, specialists for each twin, and additional nurses to manage the complex choreography of delivering 2 babies safely. The increased activity might have seemed chaotic, but David recognized the precision. In their movements, a well-rehearsed team prepared for all contingencies. Mary focused inward, gathering strength between contractions, following her body's powerful instincts. The prenatal classes had prepared her intellectually for this experience. But the reality transcended all description, primal and overwhelming. "You're doing amazingly," David said softly, supporting her physically while she pushed. His usual controlled demeanor had given way to complete presence in this moment. No phone, no distractions, nothing but total focus on Mary and the imminent arrival of their children. At 8:17 a.m., Dr. Patel announced, "The head is crowning. One more push should deliver baby A." Mary summoned remarkable strength for the final push, her determination transcending physical limitations. A moment of intense pressure, then sudden relief as the first twin entered the world with a strong, indignant cry. "It's your daughter," Dr. Patel announced, lifting the tiny girl briefly for Mary to see. "She looks perfect." Luna Hamilton Adams arrived weighing 4 pounds 8 ounces, small but mighty, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that immediately announced her presence to the world. The neonatal team assessed her quickly on the warming table, their efficient movements confirming positive signs. "APGAR score 8, called one specialist. Respiration strong, color good." David stood transfixed between Mary and the warming table, where their daughter received initial care, his expression revealing complete wonder. When the nurse offered him the opportunity to cut Luna's umbilical cord, his hands trembled. Visibly, the composed executive momentarily transformed by overwhelming emotion. Luna was briefly placed on Mary's chest for skin-to-skin contact, their first moment of connection outside the womb. Mary's exhausted face transformed with joy as she whispered, welcome to her daughter, fingers gently stroking the tiny head. "She has your nose," Mary told David, who had moved closer to study their daughter's features with unashamed awe. The peaceful moment was brief, as Mary's contractions resumed, baby B preparing for his entrance. The medical team refocused, monitoring showing some changes in the second twin's heart rate. "We need to deliver your son soon," Dr. Patel explained calmly. "His heart rate is showing some stress. Nothing alarming yet, but we don't want to wait too long." Mary nodded understanding, summoning renewed determination despite her exhaustion. Luna was transferred to David's arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, while Mary prepared for the second delivery. Isaiah proved more challenging than his sister, requiring careful intervention, as Dr. Patel discovered the umbilical cord positioned alongside his head. With expert manipulation and Mary's controlled pushing, Isaiah Hamilton Adams arrived at 8:39 a.m., 22 minutes after his sister. Unlike Luna's immediate cry, Isaiah's arrival brought moments of tense silence. The neonatal team moved with increased urgency, providing gentle stimulation and oxygen support. David stood completely still, Luna cradled against his chest, his eyes fixed on the medical team surrounding his son. The room held its collective breath until a thin cry finally emerged, strengthening quickly into healthy protest. Visible relief passed through the medical team as vital signs stabilized and color improved. He needed a little help getting started, explained the neonatal specialist, but he's responding beautifully now. 5 pounds even, with excellent lung expansion considering his gestational age. Isaiah soon joined his sister in receiving his parents' first touches, smaller than Luna despite weighing more, with delicate features and a quieter disposition. When placed briefly on Mary's chest, he seemed to recognize her heartbeat, settling immediately against her skin. Dr. Patel completed necessary medical procedures while the twins received thorough examinations. Despite their early arrival, both showed remarkable strength for 34-weekers, though the neonatal team recommended brief NICU observation to monitor their breathing and temperature regulation. They're doing exceptionally well, the lead specialist assured Mary and David. This observation is purely precautionary. They likely won't need extended NICU care if they continue showing such strong vital signs. Through the flurry of medical activity, Mary and David remained anchored to each other, and their newborns, their focus completely unified despite their complicated history. The journey from strangers to Keo parents had reached its most profound milestone with Isaiah and Luna's arrival. When the immediate post-birth procedures concluded, the delivery room quieted as most medical personnel departed. The twins rested in clear bassinets beside Mary's bed, tiny bodies connected to monitoring equipment that beeped reassuringly. Though NICU observation would follow, the doctors had granted 30 minutes of family bonding first, acknowledgement of the twins' surprisingly strong condition. David stood between the bassinets, his expression transformed by an emotion Mary had never witnessed in him before. The controlled corporate executive had disappeared entirely, replaced by a man visibly overwhelmed by the reality of his children. He reached toward Isaiah first, his large hand dwarfing the newborn's entire body. With infinite gentleness, he touched his son's cheek, then his tiny fingers. When Isaiah reflexively grasped his father's finger, David's composure finally broke completely. Tears filled his eyes, then spilled unchecked down his face. He made no attempt to hide this vulnerability, no effort to maintain the stoic demeanor that had characterized most of his adult life. The raw emotion seemed to surprise even him, as if he'd discovered capacity for feelings he hadn't known existed. David knelt on the hospital floor between his children's bassinets, one hand still connected to Isaiah's grasp, the other reaching toward Luna's dark hair. The position, humble, almost supplicant, represented complete surrender to a love he had never experienced before. "Hi, little moon," he whispered to Luna, using the nickname that had emerged during pregnancy. His voice broke with emotion as he continued, "I love you. I am here." When he turned to Isaiah, pressing his forehead gently against the edge of the bassinet, his voice carried the same profound promise. "I love you both. I will earn you, and I will earn her." This final statement, acknowledging not just his children but Mary's place in their lives, revealed the full extent of his transformation. David Hamilton, who had once declared he didn't do families, now knelt on a hospital floor openly declaring love and commitment to the family he had unexpectedly created. Mary watched from her bed, exhausted but fully present for this pivotal moment. She had witnessed David's gradual evolution throughout her pregnancy, his increasing emotional awareness, his developing capacity for connection. But this complete vulnerability represented something fundamentally different, not gradual change but transformative breakthrough. When David finally rose and turned toward her, his face remained wet with tears he made no attempt to wipe away. "Thank you," he said simply, words inadequate for the emotion they attempted to convey. "For them, for allowing me to be here, for not giving up on the possibility that I could change." Mary extended her hand, which he took with careful reverence. "They brought out what was already inside you," she replied softly. "You just needed the right reason to find it." In that moment of quiet connection, hands linked while their newborn slept nearby, something shifted in their relationship. Not romantic reconciliation or fairy tale ending, but mutual recognition of profound shared purpose. They had created not just twins but a family, albeit one with unconventional structure and unexpected origins. David maintained his emotional openness throughout the twins' brief NICU stay, spending hours beside their incubators, speaking softly about his hopes for their futures. Medical staff noticed his dedicated presence, with one nurse commenting to Mary, "Some fathers get overwhelmed by NICU equipment, but yours hasn't left their side except when you're here." "He's finding his way," Mary replied simply, neither correcting the assumption about their relationship, nor explaining its complexity. By the third day, both twins had demonstrated sufficient strength to be released from NICU monitoring. The hospital photographer captured their first family portrait, Mary holding Luna, David cradling Isaiah, their expressions reflecting exhausted joy and wonder. "You make a beautiful family," the photographer commented. Neither corrected her. In the most meaningful sense, despite all conventional definitions, they had indeed become exactly that. The twins came home to Mary's apartment first, the familiar environment, deemed less overwhelming for their transition from hospital to home. David had arranged for overnight nursing support during the initial week, anticipating the challenges of managing newborn twins while Mary recovered from delivery. What emerged in those early days was an unexpectedly seamless co-parenting rhythm. David arrived each morning at 7, enabling Mary to shower and rest while he handled the twins' first feeding of the day. He worked remotely from her small dining table, remaining available for support while respecting her space and recovery needs. "I've cleared my schedule through December," he explained while preparing bottles with surprising competence. "The company has capable leadership that can handle daily operations. This time won't come again." This prioritization, choosing present involvement over professional demands, represented perhaps the most meaningful evidence of his transformation. The man who had once defined himself entirely through business achievement now measured success by his children's well-being and his effectiveness as their father. Nights revealed the reality of newborn twins, overlapping feeding schedules, simultaneous crying jags, constant diaper changes. Mary and David developed systems through trial and error, learning each baby's preferences and personalities. "Luna wants motion when she's fussy," Mary discovered during a particularly difficult night. "Isaiah needs more swaddling pressure to feel secure." These small discoveries, shared through text messages and handwritten notes, in their communication journal, built their collective knowledge as parents. They approached childcare as collaborative problem-solving rather than competitive parenting, each acknowledging the other's developing expertise. By the third week, they established a schedule that accommodated both apartments. The twins spent weekdays at Mary's place, weekends at David's more spacious brownstone. This arrangement recognized Mary's primary caregiving role while ensuring David's consistent involvement. "I've set up identical nurseries in both locations," he explained, having researched the importance of environmental consistency for infant development. "Same cribs, same sound machines, same mobiles. They'll have familiarity regardless of location." Christmas arrived when the twins were 7 weeks old, their first holiday as a family. David suggested celebrating together at the brownstone, where he had arranged a modest tree with soft lights and baby-safe decorations. "I have something for you," he told Mary, presenting a small package after they had settled the twins for a nap. Inside, she found a delicate watercolor set in a custom-designed portable case. "For when you're ready to paint again," he explained. "It's designed to set up anywhere, even beside a crib during nap time." The thoughtfulness of the gift, acknowledgement of her identity beyond motherhood, touched Mary deeply. "Thank you for remembering the artist part of me," she said softly. "Both parts matter," David replied simply. "Mother and artist. They're not separate identities to choose between." This understanding, that parenthood enhanced rather than replaced their individual selves, characterized their evolving relationship. They remained distinct people with separate lives connected through their children, neither forcing romantic reconciliation nor denying the deepening bond between them. As winter yielded to spring, their family patterns solidified into comfortable routine. David adjusted his work schedule permanently, prioritizing morning and evening availability for the twins. Mary began painting again during nap times, producing a new series inspired by the twins' developing personalities. "I'm calling it First Light, Last Dark," she explained when David inquired about her new work. "It explores the transitions we navigate, like the Dawn series that brought us together initially." The reference to their first meeting, now transformed from awkward memory to acknowledged part of their shared history, illustrated how far they had traveled from that charity gala night. Their unconventional beginning had evolved into something neither could have anticipated, a family created through choice rather than convention. By the twins' 4-month pediatric appointment, Dr. Bernstein commented on their remarkable development. "They're thriving," she observed. "Whatever arrangement you two have created is clearly working beautifully." Neither Mary nor David attempted to explain the complexity of their relationship. Labels seemed unnecessary for the connection they had built, deeper than CEO parenting, but distinct from romantic partnership. They had created their own definition of family, prioritizing their children's well-being above conventional expectations. If your heart ever told you to stay when fear told you to run, this story speaks to you. Mary and David's journey reminds us that life rarely follows predictable paths. Sometimes our greatest challenges arrive unexpectedly, requiring courage to face what we never planned. Their story isn't about perfect romance or fairy tale endings. It's about growth, about choosing harder paths when easier options exist. David could have remained distant, providing financial support without emotional investment. Mary could have maintained rigid boundaries, limiting his involvement to scheduled visitations. Both chose the more difficult road, authentic connection requiring vulnerability and change. The lessons here transcend their specific circumstances. We all face moments when fear encourages retreat while something deeper suggests possibility. Whether in relationships, careers, or personal growth, the safe choice rarely leads to transformation. The path of potential almost always requires risk. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like this video and share your own experience in the comments. When have you chosen courage over comfort? When has stepping into uncertainty led to unexpected growth in your life? Subscribe for more stories that explore the complexities of human connection and the courage required to build meaningful relationships. I'm Mr. Peterson, and I believe our most powerful growth comes from our most challenging circumstances. The test slipped from Mary's fingers and hit the bathroom tile. 2 pink lines. Twins. Her breath caught. Her hands shook. She pressed her back to the door and slid to the floor. One night, a world she did not belong to. A choice she could not dodge. But look at them now.